office in the basement with no windows has itself become something of a character in at least my mind, that you're like broadcasting to us from your fortress of solitude or something.
Yeah, man. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot to me because people come in here when on rare occasions when I do have guests, people come in here and they're like, "Oh, it's like messy in here." And are you ever going to clean this place? It's like, no, you don't understand. This is like, it's become sort of like an extension of myself, so to speak.
Yeah, you have to deposit a part of your brain there, right?
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. It's like my home is not this way at all, but in the office, it's been fully GTD'd. Do you know what that means?
Get things done, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I had a get things done kick in like 2019, and like my office is now a beautiful sanctuary where everything is more or less where it belongs.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not where it belongs, it only would take a few minutes to get everything back.
Right.
So
that's interesting. It like I don't know to what degree like my perceptions of your personality and stuff like are gonna be accurate, because like I'm interacting with the I don't know, maybe I'm interacting with interacting. I say like I'm consuming your content, right? And so like I'm consuming the Piper's Dojo side of Andrew Douglas, But
interacting with would be better.
Okay, I mean, you're right. That is better, isn't it? But so like that's a game face, as it were, maybe in a way, And so like my perception would have been that like, yeah, I could imagine Andrew Douglas being a GTD kind of guy, just maybe because of the way that the dojo seems to run, like I don't know, seeking efficiency at all times, upgrading systems, improving methods, that kind of thing, trimming the fat, kind of, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I get that from my mom, just like I'm very analytically minded. Yeah. With very little follow through.
Very little follow through. I wonder if that's the case for a lot of us who maybe feel drawn to things like, shark habits and get things done methods and stuff. Like maybe we run through those methods and stuff in our minds more than actually put them into practice.
Yeah, and then that could be. And then I think for me, it's like, that's not actually probably true. I think I probably have a lot of follow through. I just don't follow through. I rarely ever follow through 100%.
Are you the source? Are you the reason that I think to myself sometimes done is better than perfect?
It's possible. I say that a lot.
Because I picked that up from the Chanter Rant guys, but if they picked that up from you, then, I'm just figuring out the etymology of the phrase here.
Yeah. Perfect. Anytime you try to make something perfect, it usually, obviously we all know this, usually fails. But if you succeed, it almost certainly throws the rest of your life out of balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I really struggle with that because I want it all, and I want it now. I think someone said
Queen.
that.
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want I want a happy family, and I want to get rich, and I want to play bagpipes, and I want to, I don't know what else. Oh yeah.
Have big biceps, of course.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, ironically, biceps, I don't usually worry about those.
Oh, see,
yeah,
I was just running through my own list, and it's just matching so far. So.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we're on the same page. And so if you want all that stuff, you better not be too concerned about perfection in any of those areas. But hopefully, I think maybe it'll be possible to eventually acquire a very good level in all of those.
Yeah, taking the long view maybe is a necessary ingredient there, huh?
Well, it's a fascinating, really difficult, at times painful concept, because I grew up in, Glenn Brown and I were good buddies. And Glenn is an example of a guy who decided to pursue perfection, let's say. Like just for, I'm not sure that's what he does, but let's just use that as like a talking point.
Yeah.
He decided to go for it and to get out there and try and win gold medals and stuff. And that's something that I chose not to do, and there's really, people try to say that there is a way to get back into it, but I think that's probably pretty unlikely. especially at this stage. Especially at this stage when there's so many great young players.
Oh man,
especially in Scotland.
Isn't that amazing? It's like I feel like I don't know, not just the ones that you'll see at at the clasp and stuff, right? These or even like trad awards, you see like these people and you hear them play and it's like, wow, that's amazing, and you're like, what? He's 17 years old, what?
Yeah.
But even just like on the personal local level, you see young kids coming into the band and stuff, and it's like they're playing stuff that I couldn't do until I'd been going for 10 years. How's the bar constantly going up?
Yeah, and it'll be the same for them. It'll be the same for these young talented players. The level of play will probably be higher, but at some point you have to make that decision. It's like, what darlings do I need to kill off in order to pursue this? And then is that a decision I'm prepared to make? Yeah.
There's an other end to every stick you pick up, huh?
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? And it's very challenging. And for us, having kids was the the straw that broke the camel's back. At least insofar as the illusion that you could have it all is concerned. It's just,
or you could have control over anything in your life.
Oh yeah, that could be. We should stay away from that branch because that'll be a really long podcast.
Hey, if your coffee's ready, feel free to. But
thanks,
Andrew, while you're walking, I want you to think about this question. If you were going to design a chess set based off of pipe bands, which instrument players would be which pieces? Just think about that while you walk over.
Oh, see, that's a trap. You must know something. Okay, I'm back.
So, not to get too trivial with things here, but I am curious what you might think. The thing is that my good friend Mike Swan has done some work for you, and so
how's Mike doing?
I think good. We were just talking last night. I think things are going well.
He's another guy. He has way too much balance in his life.
He's one that I think he's kind of a guiding star for me in a lot of ways.
Geez, I don't know what that means.
only in the best possible ways. But he knows that I'm very enchanted by the game of chess. Very bad at it. I'm like so bad at it, but I really love it.
We should be chess.com buddies then because
deal. I'll make you feel great about yourself, Andrew, really.
I love chess. That's not true. Whatever is just like one layer, because my brother is like, he's the real chess lover in the family, and he's excellent. I think he's got like a 1900 rating or something.
Oh wow!
Like pretty legit. You know what I mean? And so when I play slow chess, I'm between 1,000 and 1,200 probably. But I don't have time for that, so I play the fast games, and my rating is really bad. I don't know.
I'm one of those, like, if you had like a graph that shows in my head whether it's slow chess to fast chess, 7-8 moves in, it suddenly becomes fast chess because I just want to see where it goes.
Right. Yeah. Nice. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, but
and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's you're experimenting with the game.
I'm gonna choose to look at it that way. Yeah. I grew up with an uncle in the house. My mom's brother lived with us for a lot of years, and he was maybe 15 years older than me. So it's a bit like having an older brother present, and he was a big chess guy, and so that's where it started for me. And he also is the good one in the family.
Cool.
I think I probably could actually count on just my hands how many chess matches I have won in my life. But I've played hundreds just because I love it. I think it's so fun. Yeah. But a big part of it is that I am enchanted by the pieces. I love looking at novelty sets, but just the classic pieces, there's just something really enthralling about the way they look to me. And my kids and I like to kind of in our imagination and sometimes with a 3D printer design, novelty sets. We've got like a Pokemon set, and we're working on a StarCraft set and stuff like that. So what if you were going to design a pipe band chess set? Where would the snares be? Where would the tenors be? Where would the pipers be? What do you think?
Okay, so this is a difficult question.
I will be psychoanalyzing everything you say, of course.
And I haven't had long enough to think this through.
But yeah, that's fair. We should say that like this is on the toes. You might change your mind over time.
Definitely. So this is just the first stab at it. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Let's start with the pawns. I don't think you're going to expect this answer. Okay? But I think the pawns are non-players
Oh,
that support us.
we're going outside the box here. Okay.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of different types, but like, we can just group them all together. But like, think about it, right? So it's like the pawns are like these little pieces. You need to, so like, beginner's view is like you need to get those pawns kind of out of the way so you can get the important pieces into the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's the beginner's view. Like quite literally, there's only a couple pieces that could even possibly move unless the pawns get out of the way. So that's beginner's view, right? Of chess, right? And then, and so that could be like spouses and kids and.
I'm immediately imagining the pieces look like moms with cameras around their necks on straps.
Yeah, sort of. Although those would be some special pawns. I think most of them in the piping world are
Maybe
probably,
actually the power pieces.
well, and then that's what I mean. It's like I might need to think this through a little bit more.
Right.
But the beginner's view is like, okay, cool. The wife let me get away for the weekend to go to band practice or whatever. And think of this in like a sort of symbolic way, not too literal. But then as you get better at the game of chess, like you start to realize how important the pawns actually are and how their support is actually probably extremely valuable.
Yeah.
And how they are
Vital,
arranged. Yeah, and how they are arranged in your life or even in the life of a pipe band, like depending on how you're looking at this. And depending on how they're arranged, it's going to have a huge impact on the outcome of the game.
You've taken this to a deeper and more important and discussion-worthy level than I ever could have expected, Andrew. This is impressive.
Yep. I've always had that problem. So anyway, that's what I think the pawns are probably that. Okay. And then it's just going to get, I'm just going to get in a ton of trouble as I start to discuss the other things. This is the reason you asked the question.
Yep.
The reason you asked the question is because you wanted to get me to talk bad about tenor drummers.
That's the main reason. Yeah.
Which I will now do. So I think that knights and bishops are definitely bass and tenor drummers. Right? Like super limited in what they're capable of.
Kind of cool that they're in the middle of each side, though, midsection.
Oh, yeah, totally. No. And then if anyone out there who is a bass or tenor drummer is listening, I'm just trolling you. And like there's more layers to this. So I think that I actually love bass and tenor drumming, okay? Because let's just cut to the real reason you asked this question, and then we'll get back to the chess pieces.
Yeah.
I love bass and tenor drumming, but it's really rare that it's done well. Because this is what you're trying to get me to talk about, right? So when you're in a pipe band, how do bass and tenor drummers usually come to be?
They are the friends and spouses of people who play pipes, or they're people who try playing pipes and decide it's not for them.
Cool.
Again, also, no
anything
offense.
Else?
Like some of my good friends, some of my dearest friends, and they do a great job at it. But like that's if it gives me any kind of like immunity, like some of my good friends who are bass and tenor drummers have said themselves, like that's how it happened.
Right. Cool. And I suppose in some rare cases that amounts to someone becoming enamored with piping and drumming music and really like striving for mastery. Although ironically, what would probably happen in that case? They'd probably end up deciding to pick up the pipes or the snare drum, right? Yeah, because like, it would just probably tend to happen that way. Okay, and then that's usually how bass and tenor drummers are made, right? They're made from people who had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
And whose interest level are not. And by the way, I just said usually. I'm not saying always. Usually that's how they're made, right?
Probably every bass or tenor drummer listening right now is an exception to that rule, honestly.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Come on. Yeah, we got to say, come on. I'm trying to save us here.
No, it's okay. If I'm the one, it wouldn't be the first time I've upset someone. So, I might as well be the scapegoat for this one too. But that's usually what happens. Okay. And I'm sure there are, Maybe that's most people, most situations, most of the time. And there are exceptions to that. I mean, I've found, though, if you look at all of the great bass and tenor drummers, certainly all the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, it's not actually true. Maybe I can think of one or two quasi exceptions, but most of them come from a piping or snare drumming background. A few of them come from a Highland dancing background, which is kind of fascinating and interesting to think about. But most of the really good bass drummers that I know began as a snare drummer or bagpiper, or maybe a drum kit player. Maybe there's a few of those floating out there. And Mike, I guess where my point with this is, bass and tenor is like a really nuanced element of a pipe band, and without the understanding of piping or snare drumming music, or maybe some other kind of music, like maybe you play in jazz or something, and then somehow you end up playing at a high level in a midsection in a pipe band or something like that. Like all of that sounds interesting to me, but like most bass and tenor players throughout the world are not coming at this from a musical angle. They're coming at it from a strictly social angle. Like, like I have to be at the games every weekend. Might as well do something cool, tenor drum. Yeah. Right. By the way, I think a lot of bagpipers, that's basically what they're doing too, in a different way. And all of that stuff, I'm not a huge fan of. It's like if I guess my angle is that the bagpipe is like a wonderful tool of self-expression, and a wonderful musical instrument. And much beyond that, my interest level is not particularly high.
Sure. Gotcha.
Like the dress up aspect of it.
Yeah.
I'm appreciating it more as I get older, and I'm appreciating the history of it more, perhaps, let's say. But it's 95%, like for me, it's 95 to 100%, music oriented and what kind of cool music you can make.
That's interesting, because I feel like I only get more cynical about the dress up aspect of it as I get older. I take every chance I can to play a gig in pants, I just, you can tell when somebody hires you for a gig and they're like, and what are you going to be wearing? You know what I mean? Like you are going to be in the full get up, right? You can tell when that's the focus. What they really want is, and that hurts
my soul.
That it bothers me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I still take the gig because I'm a what for money, but
it's like when if you get set up on a blind date, right? Or if you're going to set up a friend on a blind date with like this really like nice woman, and all your friend wants to talk about is whether or not she's hot.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
And it's like, well, it's like, yeah, I will be getting dressed up and I'll look pretty darn nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But
like
there's
when I
more
play this
to
gig.
this. Yeah.
But there's like, yeah. And like, and the dress up aspect, it just represents like a tiny portion of my worth.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, you do realize like this is something I've done my entire life, and I've like relentlessly pursued mastery of this.
And like I'm excited to share beautiful music with you and your people. I didn't want to be eye candy.
Yeah. Well, and when you play the gig, people do come up to you and say, "Wow, that sounded really nice."
Yeah,
it's
right.
just
They're always so often surprised at that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it turns out they did enjoy it, and even the person that hired you might be like, "Wow, that was actually really amazing." It's like, yep, that was the idea.
Yeah.
And it's definitely related to why I don't play that many gigs anymore. It's like I don't feel good about it. By the way, that's funerals would be the exception. If people call me for a funeral, I'm usually happy to do it, and I usually don't bill too much, because that seems like that works for me. You come away from that thinking that you really did some good, and that your presence there like was actually meaningful.
Yeah.
And the fact that got me and not someone else is probably really part of what makes it worth doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean that like in a cocky way, just in like I took it seriously and I, and I did my best to sound as good and as musical as I possibly could. Like that seems like a solid value proposition in that setting.
Yeah, certainly. And Andrew, I don't mean to like hop around too much. I still want to find out who the rooks and kings and queens are as well. But I just wondered, like, speaking of like GTD and stuff like that, like these like, I don't know, mental games or worldviews, stuff like that. Do you find, maybe I shouldn't reveal this too much about me because it makes me sound too selfish, but I play a lot of funerals personally, and I wonder if it's a similar experience to you. You know, the sort of strong interest, maybe it's having a moment in like stoicism and the idea of like memento mori and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there's what you could call a selfish benefit to doing a lot of funerals, in that you're sort of like present for death at a somewhat frequent interval throughout your life?
Yikes.
Yeah, I know. Okay, maybe I wish I'd composed this in a prettier way, but like you are, I don't know, you become something of like a third-party observer to families and friends grieving, on a pretty regular basis. You hear the synopsis of people's lives over and over again, I don't feel like it's ever ceased to be special to me, like in spite of hearing dozens in a year, it's not like the last one is like just business as usual. There's always a little pinprick in the heart, at some point. But do you feel like it affects your life in any way? Like, is this part of how you approach the day when you wake up in the morning? Do you have more of a presence and awareness of the limitedness of the time that you have to be alive because you're present for that?
It's a really good question. I think you play more funerals than me.
Ah.
By the sounds of it. But no, yes. I think funerals are definitely in the sort of weird way that you're referring to. Yeah, absolutely. The most special of the daily gigs that you get, if you choose to let them be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also known people who do so many funerals that it's just a gig.
Right. Of course.
But yeah, maybe I do just enough. And there's definitely been some weird funerals. Weird in the sense that it's like, oh wow, holy crap, that is intense, and I'm really grateful to be alive and stuff. Yeah, I lead a sheltered existence. I live in we have 2 beautiful kids. I have a great wife, and we live in a nice neighborhood, and we have enough money, and we were both raised well, and we both come from solid families, and we've never really seen war before. And I don't know, basically, oh yeah. And like an hour a day, I leave my job and I go like do physical exercise to, in hopes that.
And it's not just to like bring the crops in. It's like.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are crops again? Oh yeah, crops are those things that right. Some people have to make so that like I can just go to the store and pick up a box of wheat thins.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then, yeah, so for me, definitely 100%, when you play at a funeral, it's like, it's a brief glance into the fact that it's all fleeting, I suppose. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yes, and definitely I'm the type of brain that would think about that in a similar way. But yeah, but it's not, for me, it's a rare enough thing. Like, let's say maybe I do half a dozen funerals a year at this point. So it's not like a regularly recurring exercise.
That might be the sweet spot though. If it was 25, 26 a year, then maybe that's where it starts to dull in its effect. And maybe you've got just enough that it's got flavor to it or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It's weird though, isn't it? Because I would also say that my ideal number of weddings per year, the ideal number would be 0.
You don't like playing weddings, huh?
Every now and then you would get, every now and then at a wedding, you get a super magical, meaningful feeling, but it's really, really exceedingly rare.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Yeah. So moving from something that feels like it's maybe deeper and bigger back to something more simple.
Yes.
What else do you want to tell me about that midsection on your chessboard? Or is that exhausted?
All right. So we talked about the pawns.
Yeah.
And then I think that the king is definitely the drum major.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
100%.
Yeah.
You know, like thinks they're important, but really can't really contribute much at all.
That's again, I hadn't thought about it. That you just took it a layer further than I had thought. I was just thinking like, yeah, well, there's one of them, so that makes it an easy choice.
And then it's like castling, right? It's like
Right.
as early in the game as possible. Anyone who plays chess will know. You kind of just want to castle,
Get him out of
and
the
you
way
want to
with it.
just take the rook and switch him with the king, so
Yeah.
that the king gets out of the way,
Yep.
so that you can go about actually like playing the game
Actually getting stuff done because he's
and
just in the way,
developing strategy.
really.
Exactly. So like that also is reminiscent of the drum major. And by the way, drum majors, if you're out there,
Once again.
I'm sure you're the exception.
Yeah.
And like you are really, because by the way, some drum majors are fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Like they do the logistics, and they're they're humbly, they're humbly there to support like the operation of the band and to try and make it as great a team as possible.
And they know
Yeah.
the tunes, so they know when the cutoff is coming.
Sure.
And they give
Yeah.
a clear
And they
signal.
know the tunes, and like, and like everything works harmoniously, and they're just amazing people. Like I've met drum majors like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for every one of those I've met, there's 99. I know you run a clean show, so let's see, 99
I can bleep stuff later. Do what you want. As long as you
spankers.
feel free.
Can you say spankers on your show?
Wait, let me check. Network executives are saying yes. Spankers
Okay.
is acceptable.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And like, okay, let's define spanker. It's just a person.
Well, that might make it less less okay, but go ahead.
But yeah, exactly. Let's not do the network definition.
Yeah.
But no, I guess what I mean, I think in this case, spanking is referring to
This is going to be the title here.
just not, and it's my same gripe with some bass and tenor players, right? Like the reason you're there is not musical.
Yeah, I mean, on the note of like uniform obsession, I do feel like the most like obtrusive will get in your face and tell you did it wrong people who I've ever encountered personally, who are going to tell me that I'm, tying my shoelaces wrong because it's not the traditional fashion or something are usually drum majors.
Yes, exactly.
And maybe that's their role. I don't know, maybe that's really what they should be doing. But.
I think if done well, it's an important role that can be really, really cool and representative and symbolic of something important and great that shouldn't be lost. Like absolutely. Like I think there's a way to do it right.
Yeah.
And I definitely, feel like there's a way to do bass and tenor stuff right. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Right. So this is not like a blanket.
Get rid of them kind of thing, right?
Yeah, or that I hate them all. That's not what this is. It's mostly like, I'm mostly just trying to defend positions that have gotten out. I think it's gotten out now. So yeah. So I think there's that. Yep, exactly.
So
like
if
on
you're
a deeper level,
Yeah,
I was just
go ahead.
I was just gonna just expound on this, right? So it's like, why do we play the bagpipes or drums or whatever? I think I'll just stick with piping because that's sort of my main lane, right? It's like it's an opportunity to express yourself, right?
Yeah.
But there's a huge, to master the skills necessary to truly express yourself in a meaningful way on the bagpipe. Like that's a huge commitment. That's a huge, let's just go with commitment, right? It's something that many of us have committed our entire lives to doing. And then of course it's like, the more you learn, the less you know type thing, right? It's like
Totally. Yeah.
it's a snowball thing, and you realize you're never going to achieve perfection. But in the meantime, sometimes you do have these moments where suddenly it comes together and you have these incredible musical experiences. And like, to me, that's what this is. It's
Yeah.
like this, a potentially wonderful thing. And then through the dojo, right? That's how I share that with the world, right? It's like students come, and then if they like what they do, they hang around, and it's my opportunity to help them realize that. And that's like, to me, that's what it is. It's something I hold very sacred. And by the way, I'm still working on trying to define it better and better, so that's clearer and clearer to others and to myself, like what that is. But then there's the opposite edge to that, right? Like there's the bagpipe cosplay status disease thing.
Yeah.
That and that's really what, on a personal level, that's really what I think I'm fighting against. And so when I see that, that's sort of like, and by the way, I don't mean enemy, like I hate those people. It's just I don't like, or that's sort of what I'm battling as a teacher and a practitioner, right?
Right.
It's like I'm battling that attitude. So when I see that attitude out there, it's something that I feel obligated to point out. And then where do you see that really commonly? Well, we talked about drum majors and in midsections and stuff, like we see that really commonly there. We need to figure out how to, peel back the layers of those onions, and like how it is possible for bass and tenor to contribute in a huge way to a great pipe band.
Yeah, if it weren't there, it wouldn't be the same thing.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And that's what we need to figure out, and that's what we need to go after.
And, I feel like even though I've never been maybe because I've never been in a midsection position myself, other than the occasional, what piper hasn't picked up a bass drum for mass bands or something, right? But, it took me a lot of years to appreciate what a good midsection even was, very kind of blinders on, only focusing on finger work kind of thing, but,
And it's not even about whether or not the midsection is great. It's about how they orient the thought process.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, and I think maybe that's maybe like the clarifying thing for a lot of what you're describing here. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that it's not so much that you're waging a war, as it were, or battling against individual humans. It's more against a mindset. And
yes,
it's like,
amen.
How can we weed out that mindset and replace it with, something that is deeper, better, more correct? I don't know, more. I'm struggling for words for it too, but it's not that you look at a person who maybe came to piping because they want to wear a kilt and say, get that person out of here. It's more like look at that person and say, but also check out the music, and maybe kind of convert them to this other ideology or focus or reason for being around, as it were.
Yes. It's alluring.
Yep.
It's alluring, but it's like it's a rare opportunity. Piping represents a rare. I was speaking about the hamster wheel earlier. Like the bagpipe represents a unique opportunity to get off the hamster wheel, and for some, maybe it's for a few minutes each day.
Yeah.
And then for me, I'm just sort of like this bizarre outlier where it's represented like an entirely different way my life could go. Mm-hmm. Right? Which is fascinating. But like, that's sort of what it is. It's like this really wonderful, sacred opportunity. And then like, just like with all of these types of opportunities, what do most people probably do? Right? It's like they probably give into the temptations on the opposite edge, of the blade, right? So it's like, oh, all you have to do is like figure out how to make a continuous sound come out of it, and suddenly people give me tons of free beer,
right?
And hit on me.
Yep.
At St. Patrick's Day and Memorial Day and 4th of July.
I get my patch, as it were. Now I can wear my kilt in public, and
yeah, and that's really a shame. And then like, don't read into this too literally, but like I can tell you as someone who's like, worked towards mastery, it's like all of those things that you are tempted to enjoy, all of those things are available to you as well. It's like, so you don't have to pick one or the other.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the free beer and stuff. I'm talking about like, let's say status. right? Like sometimes we behind the scenes at the dojo,
but
we call
also
it
the free beer and stuff
bagpipe
too.
status
You also
disease.
don't have to give that
Yeah.
stuff up. But go on, yeah.
Yeah, but that's that's exactly my point though. So
Yeah.
but like that's I think that's the reason people are doing it, and whether or not that was their original intention is another question. But it's sort of fallen back into that.
You can get sidetracked into that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and that can happen at any point, and it's something that I often think about. It's like, am I just sitting back right now and enjoying my status, or am I still going after it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that would be a key question that, I don't know. Seems like a great opportunity and you don't want to waste it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because those opportunities are rare.
Yeah. It might be a mistake for me to even head down this road, Andrew, but I can't help thinking that like it's interesting. Like I grew up in a very very conservative religious community. And it's interesting to me that some of the adjectives that we're using in this conversation begin to feel a little bit like questions of morality almost. Where like to borrow some of that parlance, right, is like the cheap and fleeting things that are easier to come by won't bring you lasting joy, right? But there's something deeper that will. It's not that you have to give up happiness. You'll get a deeper and more abiding joy by doing the harder thing. Does that make sense?
That makes 100% sense.
And probably I'm not the only one who can speak to like that sort of like background being somewhere present in their brain. And so I think that's part of maybe what makes these ideas make some sense is like, sure, go for the cheap thrills if you really want to, but there's something better here. You have to look a little deeper. You have to dig a little deeper. You have to work a little harder, but it's more fulfilling. It will fill up your life, throughout, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like absolutely fascinating to think about. And then but then you could take an organized religion, like let's leave yours specifically out of it, but like you could take an organized religion of some kind, and then you would see the exact same things.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and then like CrossFit, I do CrossFit, and
that's your organized religion, right?
Well, but that's like exactly it, right? So CrossFit would be accused of being sort of like this cult-like thing,
yeah,
right?
Yep.
And it is, sort of ish. It's not. It's actually 0% that, because for a variety of reasons we can talk about.
That's
it
exactly
really
what a cult member would say.
Yes, exactly. But it's all the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There are some people that do CrossFit like because they enjoy the abs, and they want to tell people that they went unbroken.
Hey, man, I'm a fan of abs too. So
Yeah.
like, I'm not gonna.
Exactly. Like you might not want to join if biceps is all you care about. We can talk about, how like the more recruitment patterns of all the whatever. Yeah. But but it's like anything. But then it's like you could probably say that about a lot of these religions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then there's the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it, I think, probably.
Yeah.
And if you're a practitioner of religion, right, and if you're at the higher end of things, giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, right, it's like you've probably realized how doing it right can have huge positive impact on your life, right? And that's probably why you're so involved. But then I think there are others who just enjoy the status and the protection, and the groupthink and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I think you see it everywhere.
And I think it can be understandable too. Like you can look at this and go like, well, I can see why any human would be drawn to that kind of thing, right? And one tries not to feel too superior or anything like that, right? But I feel like there's something swirling around and almost making a connection here, Andrew, where it's like, is chess about the pretty pieces, or is there something deeper there that you begin to see, you begin to unpeel if you engage with the game, over the course of many matches? And then is pipe band about the feather bonnets and the kilts, or is there something deep about like emotional expression through a musical instrument that, especially when like the barriers to entry are high, it takes a lot of work and dedication. Does years of work and dedication shine through in a subtle way in a 2-minute tune,
Oh.
And then,
Well, and it's not that subtle.
and not even subtly, right? And
Like, so
and then
when
we've got like CrossFit. Like, is it just the abs, or is there something more about habits and rituals there? And then rituals. What about religion?
I
Like
would say
this.
like the most amazing CrossFitters I've met,
Yeah.
like they don't have abs yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's
That's
just like
interesting.
like when you chat with them, and they're kind of like me. It's like we're still trying to get one of those abs to poke through, right?
One of those abs, like, a little off to the left over here. Check it
But
out.
like it's like it's still trying to get those. But then like you watch them jump up and like do 25 pull-ups without stopping, and then like later you're chatting with them and you're like blah blah blah, and it just like casually comes up in conversation that they lost 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they suffer with like anemia or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, and you just did that, and like you're healthy and you're focused, and you're not like just sitting idly by waiting for your diabetes prescription or something. Like that's really cool.
Yeah. The fact, actually, Andrew, like I want to kind of like flip this a little bit, like where I do tend to be, I think, more cynical and critical of things like uniform focus and like traditional forms of music, like in competition and stuff like that, than I ought to be. Like I often regret what I say after I've said it.
Yeah, me too.
But I also think that like maybe there's an effect here that I feel like speaking of like individuals in a religious community, that I feel like I've seen sometimes in some of the older members of my own religious community, that like there's a coming round with new appreciation or understanding to things that are surface levels. So, because I'm thinking like surface level, like religious rituals and rites seem important when you're a little kid and you're told you have to do this to get into heaven, or you're going to, you're going to go to hell or something, right? Then you reach this cynical point where you go, wait, this is stupid. It's just trinkets, like this has no deep meaning. Then maybe if you like come round years, decades later, maybe there's like a deeper symbolic meaning somewhere that you can appreciate that you couldn't appreciate when you're in your cynical phase.
Yeah.
In my pipe band religion,
a lot like,
am I cynical?
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like, it just sounds awfully familiar. Go ahead, continue. Because
I'm just wondering, like, if you say that as you're getting older, you begin to appreciate more things about the uniform, its history, stuff like that. I wonder, are you a little more enlightened than me? And am I still deep in my cynical phase? And will I come round in the next, years or decades to like really, really love, feather bonnets and MSRs again? Not the same way that I did when I was a teenager, because I did love them when I was a teenager, but in a shallow way that didn't last, because now I'm cynical about them. Will I love them in a deeper way, when I come back round to them? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. And then like, I think it's likely in the realm of pipe bands, I think it's likely that I'm quote unquote more enlightened, just because like it's sort of been my singular focus.
You've been doing it longer and deeper for sure.
30 years. Yeah.
There's another quote I better not pull out of context, but
yeah, exactly. Try and sneak a few by the censors.
Yeah,
there.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I think so. And I think what you're describing, it's like really, really familiar. And it's not just in pipe bands.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So like when I was a young piper, it was all glory all the time. I mentioned Glenn Brown earlier because I think we represent the same thing to each other. It's like, it's the first time either of us met a true adversary.
Yeah.
Just because for whatever reason, and maybe it was just circumstance, but we were young hotshots, and when it was games day, we woke up in the morning, put our stuff on, and like went out there, and just, if we didn't get the first place, we'd try and figure out what went wrong, and then we do it all again the next weekend. And that's the way that it was. And it's like you said, right? It's like, that's kind of like the trinkets. That's kind of like the trinkets phase.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, oh yeah, MSRs, cool. Like I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to lay it down, and I'm going to do the P-Brock. And that's another way to sort of like, progress. And then like, eventually I think you hit the wall, and then that's probably when the cynicism starts to, you know what I mean? Like the utility of the trinkets, starts to wear off, and you start to meet up with adversity. And then then what? I think that's when the cynicism really started to creep in.
Yeah, and
For me,
that's
that
probably
was-
the point where some people drop piping or drumming, right? That's maybe where it phases out of their life.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I think that's right. I think the realization that the just like the sort of worthless, not really worthless, but the cheap, like you were saying before, the cheap attention that you get just from making noise and dressing up, like that really can't take you that far.
Yeah.
Not really. It's like, sorry, honey, and like I'm not going to be around this weekend because I'm just going to be, getting
Making noise
hammered
and
in my
dressing up,
kilt, making noise that's not even particularly easy on the ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not going to work.
right.
That's hard to sell. And then that at best represents a serious de-escalation of your commitment to piping, right? And then I think most of the time it represents that sort of symbolically what represents people quitting. But that's not just, that happens in the high level solo competing world as well.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like the novelty wears off. So when I moved to British Columbia for college, right, I played with the SFU pipe band for a long time.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
But that resonates perfectly. The cynicism arc, and it's not necessarily cynicism like, oh, this is all stupid and I hate this, so I'm not going to do it anymore. But it's like suddenly you go from waking up in the morning on games day expecting first prize to just knowing you're not going to get one.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? It's like, well, I still got seconds and thirds and fourths. But what it means is it's like it's decision time. It's like you either have to dig in and figure out how you're going to take this to the next level. And that's a hard thing to do. And it's going to be a lot of discomfort, a lot of delayed gratification, best case scenario. And there are no guarantees anymore. But doesn't that sound kind of familiar? It's like,
Oh yeah.
it's like religion. I was not brought up religious, so I'm speculating. But
Go ahead. I think you're hitting on the right. What's the metaphor here? You're banging on the right door.
Yeah. So when life is easy, the simple aspects of religion that are probably like therapeutic and probably earn you a lot of attention and stuff, like when life is easy, that's great. But right around 12 or 13, it's like the ease of life starts to begin to wear off, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And then you probably, and then they call that adolescence, right? You sort of become cynical and you're like, this is all stupid and I don't need any of you people and this is all lame. And then you have to go through all of the extremely painful aspects, like things that are necessary to learn. And then and then adulthood sort of represents when you decide to make a go for it anyway, even though everything's shit.
That it's I love that, Andrew. Like I don't know how many people will resonate with that. I suspect that most people actually resonate with that idea. I think that most humans resonate with that idea. That like it sounds defeatist, but it actually isn't. It's actually beautiful. Like it's like, look, I used to say everything was wonderful. And, and like that sounds nice, right? But just to say that everything's shit and I'm going to recognize that it is and we're all in it together and we're choosing to move forward anyway, that's actually one of the most beautiful, that's what is amazing about humanity to me.
Yes.
Maybe I took that too hard.
No,
Is that what you were going for?
I think you're probably right. And then
Speaking of being cynical, here I am, right?
No, I think you're right about that. I think that arc resonates with me and makes sense to me. But it's also like maybe you and I are sitting in a privileged position, not privileged in the pop culture sense of the word, but like privileged as in like that's the arc we've chosen.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then how much money is there to be made? And like how much easier is it when you can keep the people around you in adolescence mode?
That is an interesting point, because you mentioned that like around 12, 13 is where things start to break down for you a little bit, in some ways, if we're looking at this like stages of faith religion view. But that adolescence phase doesn't necessarily marry up with your chronological age. So in piping, does your adolescence phase set in your mid-30s? Well, it may well, depending on where you started and how much you play.
Or
and
do
stuff
you ever
like that.
leave?
Or do you ever leave? Absolutely. Do you stay in that first stage of piping until you die? Maybe you do.
I see a lot of adults, and by the way, it's really bizarre when these people are people that you look up to.
Yeah.
But I have
that
people
never meet
like,
your heroes thing.
yeah, but it's like, so you look up to them and you really admire them. And it could be for any aspect. It could be for any reason. And then you realize, wait a minute. These are just, well, and like to use today's terminology, it's like, these are just adolescents that are dressing up like adults. Mm-hmm. And they actually haven't, they might not even be conscious of what's going on, and they're just like perpetually kind of stuck there. And then I find that really depressing and difficult to bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's no explaining it either.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
You might respect somebody for like one very specific skill that they're very good at, and then you might realize that the reason they're so good at that one thing is that they're an uncomplicated human. They're very one-dimensional, and that's the only thing that they could do.
And then like tons of uncomfortable thoughts spring from that. Like, here's another really uncomfortable thought. Would I be happier if I just remained an adolescent?
Oh man, there's an uncomfortable thought that's run through my head a lot.
Like,
you've seen The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the guy who sells him out in the first Matrix movie? He's sitting with the agent at the restaurant, and he's like, and I decide ignorance is bliss, right?
Amen.
Is it easier to just go back to the Matrix? Do you regret stepping out?
Can you go back?
Can you? Absolutely. Can you? Is it even possible?
Yeah. But, and then like, yeah. Yeah, it's all very challenging.
Well, and here's the other thing too, Andrew. When you're in that position where you've either stepped out of the Matrix purposefully, or you've been pulled out of it, you didn't realize you were stepping out of it, but now you find yourself outside of it. Do you look around at your friends in the pipe band Matrix, as it were, and do you think to yourself, which would be better, to try to pull them out, or to just let them enjoy the Matrix as long as they can? You know what I mean?
Right. Yep. Great question. And then like, it didn't go that great for Morpheus,
Right. Yeah.
He had a hard time. He decided to commit to pulling people out. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, what's the right way to do it? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Actually, I am quite sure.
Speaking of the Piper's Dojo, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, bagpipe stuff. Yeah. No, but yeah, I am quite sure. Or let's just say like, I have made that decision that, you got to try to endure all the discomforts surrounding, teaching people. And it's extremely rewarding when it works out. Yeah. So, it's extremely rewarding when people get it. But it's also extremely rare.
Yeah.
It's like so painfully rare.
But isn't there a relationship there? Like that's...
Yes.
You have, and I'd like to hear some of your story too. Like, if I understand correctly, you have something of like a formal music education. And so you've got to be familiar with other instruments. And so tell me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me like maybe part of the specialness of the bagpipes is precisely the limited nature of it and its temperamentalness and how long it takes to get to a point where you can actually be expressive. All of those things make it so the payoff is so much better precisely because it's so rare, And I feel like maybe similarly teaching with the Piper's Dojo, there's, again, like how many hundreds of hours, thousands of hours do you spend before you get that minute that's magic,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and like, first of all, isn't it limitation that makes all art wonderful? It's not the variety of things you can do that makes art interesting. It's what you do despite the challenges.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think you're right. Yeah.
It's like, why, if Van Gogh was alive today instead of when he was alive, which I don't know when, like one of those years in the past, right?
Yeah.
No one would care.
Somewhere between 0 and 18th century, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he would be on some dark web forum cutting off his ear, and no one would care, right?
No one would care.
And why is that? Right? It's because now you can just take a picture.
Yeah.
And then you can mess around with it in Photoshop.
Right. Make it swirly
like,
or
you know,
whatever.
I'm of course grossly simplifying things, right? But like the amazing thing about Van Gogh and like, you know, all these painters, impressionists, were Dadaists painters? I don't know. But anyway, like all of these people, they were doing amazing things with a paintbrush.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting and really incredible and worth pursuing because you weren't going to be able to get that any other way. And by the way, I'm sure there are modern painters today who could totally disprove or, you know, stick holes in what I just said. And I'm sure there are things you can do with a paintbrush still that a camera can't do. And it's probably really interesting. But I'm just sort of thinking about that because you're referring to the bagpipe being like a restrictive kind of instrument, right?
Yeah.
We only have 9 notes. We don't even have choice over what pitch we're going to play.
Right. Yeah.
It's like not a thing, you know, whatever pitch you start at is not the pitch you're going to end up at, which is really interesting and fascinatingly difficult. And then does that make the payoff greater? I'm going to go with definitely yes.
Yeah. I think so too.
Because I can just pick up my guitar and hold my phone up to it and it'll tune it for me and it'll pretty much stay.
Right. Yeah.
And then like all you have to do is pluck the string.
And it sounds pretty.
Yeah. And I think that's why guitar is such a popular instrument. It's extremely accessible.
And of course, that's not to say that there are depths and heights that can be reached on the guitar, like there can be with anything. But
usually what we're hearing, like Jimi Hendrix was taking the guitar, he was pushing the boundaries of what's possible on the guitar.
For sure. Yeah.
And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
I think.
I remember the first time listening to Hendrix that I realized that like he was like talking through his guitar, you know?
Yeah.
It was an epiphany for me.
And like think of it less of talking and more of just like actually really honestly expressing himself.
Yeah, it was like it skipped over spoken words. He was like emoting directly, yeah.
Well, just watch like Gary Kasparov play chess or any of these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, even Magnus Carlsen, I mean like his brain like operates in this like totally unique, bizarre way.
I love watching him play. It's like
and
is that guy human? He's so unique. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like and then meanwhile, if he played against a computer, he would lose. Right. So it's not really about the winning of the games. It's about the expression. Right.
Hey friends, just this quick little note to remind you that you can follow the show on social media. You can write into the show via email. You can support the show on Patreon, and we do fun giveaways over there. In fact, I was slow to do the giveaway for January, so this week we're giving away one of Stephanie Burns' books and an album from the Freestylers, a piping album or merch item. And also, speaking of merch items, you can buy stuff at bagpipeswag.com, and if you have a pipe band that you want to sell stuff for on bagpipeswag.com, that's also a thing that can happen. And I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Andrew Douglas. If you haven't tried the Piper's Dojo before, give it a try. It's super awesome. Back to the conversation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I feel like it's a similar concept maybe to like the idea in music of tension and release. Like if a song were all release, you know, if it was all pretty major chords, it's kind of uninteresting. But when something is discordant and then it resolves, that resolve is magic. It wouldn't have been if it hadn't been discordant first.
Yes. Makes a lot of sense. Yep. And then like, it makes a lot of sense to me. Absolutely. But I think that is, I think just to go back to your original point, I think that is the hidden pearl in pursuing the bagpipes for sure. Is the high that you get on those rare instances when things go well. I mean, it's not really parallelable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's an aspect of sharing. Like, I think there's a sharing element, you know, which is really interesting as well.
Are you thinking like as in when you perform or as in when you participate with a band?
Yeah, both.
Okay, yeah.
So there's a sharing element, and like a no man is an island type element as well.
Yeah.
So like a performance where everything's clicking, if there are witnesses, it seems to be more meaningful than when it happens by yourself. Like when it happens by yourself, it's great. When it happens with others, it's exponentially greater. It seems like,
Yeah.
you know, or also even maybe when you're with others and it's not perfectly clicking, there's also a, like you also tend to forgive that a lot more, in context.
Yeah.
Or with added challenge.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, churches and pipe bands are pretty similar.
Look, I'm not even joking, man. I've been putting together notes. There's a professor who I am planning to reach out to. He's a professor of like anthropology and religion and music, and he like writes interesting pieces on like the co-development of religion, language, and music over the expanse of human evolution. I don't know if he'll ever agree to it, but I want to present an idea to him to come on the show at some point to talk about how pipe bands are religions. and
yeah, can I sit in on that one?
For sure, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Get you to come. What do they call it? Not proctor the exam. What is it? To listen to the course as this professor. We'll see if we can convince him. Andrew, I've already kept you for an hour. Do you still have time to tell me your entire life story?
Yeah, I got time. It's like sort of the week between Christmas and New Year's right now. So
awesome. Well,
I'm fulfilling my plan at the moment, which is to do nothing particularly specific all week.
Good. Well, let me join you for a little longer.
And by the way, that totally is a great representation of our conversation as well.
It is, isn't it? So what then? Let's go back to specifically doing nothing, specifically talking about nothing that will spiral into something. What about the rooks and the queens?
Okay, well, it's pretty interesting. I'm not necessarily sure that it matters who's more important in a pipe band, the pipers or the snare drummers. So like it definitely seems like the pipers, but it's like, but that's only because two judges represent their score when only one represents the snare drummers, blah, blah, blah. Like for me, the pipers and the snare drummers and then how they relate are the most important things. So
have you ever thought that, like, I don't know if you remember Homer making an excellent point to Ned Flanders that nobody would be upset with crabgrass if it had a cute name like elf grass?
Right.
What if it was called, what if these were called snare drum bands instead of called pipe bands? Like, to what degree is the thing that we call it what is coloring our perception of what it is, that it's pipers accompanied by drummers?
I like that general thought experiment. I'm not sure what I think, but I love that train of thought because it makes sense to me. And like, is my favorite part of playing in the band the pipers or the drummers? Yeah. Like I'm piping, I'm standing in there, I'm doing my piping thing. But like, what's my favorite part? I'm not quite sure. And I think it's just the teamwork element and and how it all works and how it's like this little functioning society without actually, like all telepathic. It's like a telepathic functioning society with no human, with none of those like familiar human rules. It's like some sort of new thing.
Yeah. I've made music with like a traditional sort of like folk band makeup, of instruments, and that's a lot of fun for sure. But it has struck me as interesting that you can talk to each other while you're jamming, while you're playing, even while you're performing. You can turn away from the microphone and say something to each other. Whereas with pipe bands, if for no other reason that it's so dang loud, once you push go, it has to be telepathic, right? Because like there's no other option. In fact, even the pipe major is using their foot to lead. That's weird,
And then like I think the foot is cheap.
It's yeah. So maybe I should say they at minimum are using their foot. They ought to be using more, right?
I mean, some of the coolest moments, and Stuart does this a lot, and I used to do it a little bit, and Terry used to do it a little bit.
Stuart and Terry probably learned it from you, actually.
Oh yeah, I highly doubt that. I learned a lot from those two. That's for sure, though.
Yeah.
You know, and then, where let's not get sidetracked. But like some of the coolest moments where they would just stop with the foot, and the thing would just go, and it would just, you know, and usually that's the reason they stop is because like there's no more need for me at the moment, and then like it just kind of cranks. And it's really cool. And it's a little bit of a bro flex too. Like if you ever, it's like something fun to watch, but like at the Worlds, when a band is going really, really well, sometimes you'll see the pipe major just like step back into the group and stop leading, quote unquote. And like, it just sounds incredible. It's like this, it's like a really cool flex. It's like, yo, check this out.
Is this like when the really, really good CrossFitter doesn't have to do crunches in front of you to show that they have excellent abs? It's like the pipe major's like, look at what I've built. I don't even have
look
to
at what
do
I can do,
this.
right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, like it doesn't matter what I look like. Look at what I can do.
Yeah.
Or in the case of the pipe band, it's like just listen to what's happening with no leadership input. It's like a cool, beautiful moment that can occasionally happen. And it fires me up, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But then I was getting around to a point, but I lost it.
It'll come back. It's floating in the air
yeah,
somewhere.
the telepathic aspect. Yeah. And then the idea that pipe band is so loud, and so you have no choice but to just shut up and try to communicate telepathically, for lack of a better word. Like, I love that idea. Have you ever read The Music Lesson?
I don't think so.
By Victor Wooten?
Oh, okay. I haven't read the whole book, but I follow Victor Wooten pretty darn closely. Okay, so I have the sample of the book on Kindle, so I've read whatever's in the sample. I should commit and buy it, but I like Victor Wooten a lot. So
it's a really cool book, and like he gets really into these sort of metaphysical ideas.
Kind of like the spiritual ideas of music, right?
The point I'm remembering my point that I was going to make. It's not only the fact that you can talk or communicate with others while you're playing music with them, right? It's that you must, or another way of putting it is, that's what it is. It's not anything else.
Oh yeah,
right?
You're not doing that while playing. That is what you're doing.
That is what you're doing. And it's and it's an incredible feeling, and you can only truly experience that feeling. Here's another thing. You can only truly experience that feeling if you have control over the fundamentals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's like, the plug for something like Piper's Dojo for sure. Like, you got to get the fundamentals down before you can start the expressing.
Yeah, and what are the fundamentals, okay? And the fundamentals are not expression. And that, you know, that's a huge thing that people get confused. It's like, yeah, expression is wonderful. We definitely want that. Definitely. But like, you need to be able to go from note to note without crossing noises, and you got to have grace notes, and eventually you're going to need the embellishments to be good. And then we also need to be able to blow steadily. We also need to be able to identify when things are in tune versus not in tune. At least to some standard, we're going to need those things.
Yeah.
And only then are you going to be able to experience some of these amazing things.
Because that kind of clearing those out of the way is kind of what lets the amazing things shine through or break through.
Yeah. Did you say you have kids?
I do. Yeah.
So like when they're little babies, right? And you sit them down, you sit one kid down next to another kid, right? Mm-hmm. Do they play together? No, they play next to each other for quite a while.
Very true. Yeah.
Right? For quite a while, they play next to each other. And then like only later, once you've mastered a lot of disparate fundamentals, do you notice them actually playing with the other kids?
That's an interesting parallel, though, because so many of those fundamentals are things like fine motor skills and stuff, which that's exactly what you're going for with the piping fundamentals as well.
Right.
Is fine
motor skills, and you know, like, and then once you have a mastery of those things, once you can move around freely, suddenly it becomes interesting to interact. Oh, and then by the way, when two kids do start playing together, is it like beautiful and harmonious? Like only rarely.
Those beautiful moments that shine through, right?
You're right. It's like, and then you're introduced to like this whole new like like this whole new beautiful layer.
Yeah.
And it's the same with
is an
nerds,
interesting
right?
idea. Yeah.
It's the same with nerds. So like
The card
Dungeons
game
and,
or the individuals?
no, like just like people
people who are nerdy
we
about it.
consider to be nerds.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, like I'm obvious, as a
I don't think
I'm a
there's any
nerd.
debate for sure.
But like you can look at people playing chess, right?
yeah.
Like we can stick with the chess example. When two really good players get together and actually play each other, it's so much more than just like moving pieces around.
That is so true. Yeah.
And then like Dungeons and Dragons was what popped into my mind, which
Yeah.
I've never played, but it seems to me like there's some sort of connection and some sort of like combination of self-expression that goes on when you get people together who all understand Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, for sure. That's such a strong
that's why
parallel.
they
That's
do
such a good
it.
point. The like I listen in on, like, as you might say, professional D&D sessions where the individuals playing all have such complete mastery of those rule books that they don't have to break the dance in order to check the book. But when I play, personally, I have not mastered those fundamentals. And so
That's like that's such a beautiful like line of thought process there.
yeah,
really cool.
it's making a lot of sense. Like,
And then, by the way, bringing it back to another thematic element, it's like, think about the stereotypical, like, Stranger Things, Dungeons and Dragons kid, right?
uh-huh.
And, like, think about just how valuable and meaningful it would be for that type of person, the nerd type person, to be able to escape the hamster wheel,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
right? And so, like, so you can make fun of it. Dungeons and Dragons is really kind of weird and dorky, or is it? Or have they found something that we, the criticizing don't get a chance to do? And
Yeah.
it's like, and it's really, everything is really kind of flipped, isn't it?
Man, and this is interesting too, because looking at Dungeons and Dragons, like, I had some friends who played when I was younger, but they had not yet mastered it. And so when I witnessed it, it didn't click. I didn't get the magic of it.
Yep.
But when I encountered some of these, again, air quotes, professional sessions where mastery was already there, then the magic of it was shining through so completely that I wanted to do that too, you know?
Yes. And that's like, Mr. Holland's Opus, where they cancel the music program
Yeah.
or whatever. Spoiler alert.
Oh, no. Look, they haven't seen it by now.
But like, that's the big question at play there. And by the way, it's also, that is one reason why sports are good, because it's the same. Sports is the same. I played sports when I was a kid, and like, I was good enough basketball player to be dangerous. And that's what it is, right? It's like this, it's like a brief opportunity to express yourself freely. And it's a little bit about
interesting.
competition. Competition's cool. We like it. It definitely adds gasoline to the fire, right?
Yeah.
But that's not really what it is.
It's interesting that maybe there's a relationship between how easy it is for an individual to criticize something and how deeply they know that thing. Because I'm just thinking to myself, like, I was made to play sports when I was a kid. Like, my parents put me in soccer and basketball and stuff like that. I definitely never achieved, like, mastery on a personal level such that I could actually participate in the team. Indeed, as I got older, the team was doing things and I was off to the side. I was never a cohesive part of the team.
Yes,
And
that makes sense to me. So a lot of sports I played, I was like that. Like, basketball was the only sport where I was like integratable. Yeah.
I wondered, like, to what degree. So then, like, I have flippantly in the past criticized sports, recognizing that there's value to, like, being healthy and moving around. But, like, I have privileged the position of my chosen hobbies, like music and pipe band, above that of those who might choose to do sports. I'm being a little bit flippant here, right? But, as if, like, the sports pursuits are, like, of a lower order and, like, only the knuckle draggers would do that. Whereas I'm, a more enlightened individual. And so I do art instead, right? But if I think about it, like, no, it's how many reps did I put in, right? That's the reason I've been able to participate in a cohesive way with musical groups, right? If I had given the same time and effort to sports, I probably would feel just as deeply and positively about the value of sports being something deeper than just moving your physical body around.
Yeah, I would just augment what you said and like, how many thoughtful, purposeful reps did you put in?
Yeah.
Because that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's true.
So it maybe never clicked for you, with sports, but I mean, like, you can show up more than other people, and then the other people can get more out of it because it's like how they're able to apply themselves is really important.
Yeah, that's so interesting too. Like I've had brief stints as a lower grade pipe major, and it has been boggling to me. Like how do you integrate individuals? That's really what it comes down to. Is like if you've got a bunch of individual pipers and drummers, then it sounds like a big cacophony of individuals. Like it sounds like little kids playing next to each other. We're in a circle, but we're each playing next to each other. We're not playing together. How do you get to that point where we're playing together?
Exactly. And there's only one way.
Piper's Dojo.
PipersDojo.com. No, there's only one way to do it, which is, and by the way, there's only one way to get humans to play together. Right? There's only one, which is, the individuals need to master the prerequisite skills to a certain degree. Like maybe master is not the right word. They need to become competent with the requisite skill sets.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it. Like, for example, like in Mad Men, the secretaries like played this enormous role in like those ad agencies. But like if they couldn't type, they weren't getting that job. Let's say that's one of like that's just something that popped into my brain for some reason.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
But like, there are requisite skills. Yeah. One of the reasons that Dojo has done well, let's say so far, is that I can type really fast.
Oh yeah? Wait, literally?
Like, that's it.
That's literally one of the things?
Like that's literally one of the things. Like if I couldn't type fast, like there would be no Dojo really.
Just wouldn't have produced as much content? Is that the idea?
And it's like, and the fact that I spent tons and tons of hours on computers during my childhood, like plays largely into it. Because you see like, I'm not the only person who's thought of doing bagpipe lessons on the internet.
Sure.
And there's a lot. There's a lot of people who would like to probably, but they don't have the requisite skills.
Yes, it is something like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable with fanning the flames of ego or anything, but
that doesn't make me uncomfortable.
Okay, well, sit back and relax. Here it comes. It has occurred to me before, just like what a remarkable sort of like confluence, is that the word? Like a meeting of the waters, as it were, to pull in the title of a pipe band or a pipe tune, where like we needed someone like Andrew Douglas who had some high level experience with piping, who also in that same human had exposure to the internet and computers, and also had drive and interest in education, because you have to spend time on that. You could choose to spend it on other things, right? All of those things had to come together for a product like the Piper's Dojo to exist. You might have any number of individuals with any one or two of those things, but what turns of fate, and serendipitous occurrences came together to make an individual at the right time in the right place to make this happen. And that could be applicable to, everybody really with what they do in their spheres. Right. But it's an interesting thing, I guess is all.
It's really interesting. And that's exactly it. And by the way, like, I think that's probably true for everyone, right? It's like, there's a confluence of ingredients.
Yeah.
That'll put together what it is that, you're going to be able to do really, really well. And I think there's another element too, right? So like think of the next inception layer up, right? So we're talking about prerequisite skills, right? That are able to like create this business. But then you could think of like the business as a prerequisite skill, right? Or the thing that you're trying to sell, like that's your prerequisite. And then like, I think the next key ingredient is like, what do you do with that layer? Like, what do you have to say? How are you going to express that layer? Because a lot of people are missing that as well. A lot. So there's a lot of bagpipe teachers out there, many of whom play better than me. Not that many, a few, let's say. No, just kidding. But so these people have obviously tons and tons of skill. And they might even be good at communicating how to play well. But then what? It's like Shakespeare had something to say, I think.
Yeah. How do you get butts and seats to listen to you?
Yeah. And you might be able to put like the words on the page, and you might be able to have the audience there that's willing to listen. But then what are you going to say? And like the stuff that he said was really the secret sauce. It wasn't, people think it's how he said it, or like you said, that he had butts and seats that were there listening, but that's not really it. It's like you have to take those and figure out what you have to add to it. And I think I hope, because if it's not true, I'm in trouble. But like, I hope that's what really drives the value. If you, are a dojo member, let's say, it's like what we're saying is different than
than
what other people say. And
like
it's
the
not
core
different.
ideas that are like behind the words, right?
It's all the ingredients are the same, right? Like we have verbs and nouns and adjectives, and we teach you not to have crossing noises and how to play the embellishment. Like, we have those same ingredients that other bagpipe teachers are going to have, but I think that we take it to an augmented place for those who are receptive.
That makes sense to me. I mean, it feels a little bit like you say, you can have pretty words. A phrase that here's something that comes to mind. Tell me if it feels applicable. Is that we have had the Iliad in our canon of literature for centuries, and surely other stories have been told that have not lasted that long. And in the Iliad, there are any number of pretty words. The rosy fingers of dawn creeping over the horizon comes to mind, because I am looking out the window right now as the sun is rising. And that's pretty, but we might have something just as pretty in any number of poems and stories that have not lasted. So why has the Iliad lasted? And it's maybe because, aside from having pretty words, because that is an important element, it also has deep and meaningful ideas that last, And so maybe that's part of the idea, right? Not only is the Piper's Dojo expressing things in a clear way that people can consume, as it were, like it lands well, but there are deeper concepts and ideas behind it that, are sticking, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Could be. We might need more trinkets.
Maybe you need more trinkets, yeah.
Yeah.
Another badge system or something, huh?
Well, yeah. Maybe that was like a ill-fated attempt at that.
I wasn't making fun of it. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's potentially cool too, but I don't know if the execution has been as good with that particular element of things, but yeah, we're working at it, and maybe we'll figure it out. But yeah, maybe we're missing some key ingredients, because like the Iliad really is like such a great example, or the Bible or something like that, right? It's like you've codified sort of really important knowledge. This is all conceptual. I don't necessarily know that much about either of these, but like you've codified really important messaging, like in story form.
Right. The story becomes like a vehicle.
That's I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I've become like mildly obsessed with like this whole comet theory. Where like 12,000 years ago or something, like there was a series of comet chunks that hit the Earth, and how like the theory that there were actually advanced civilizations before that.
I love digging it. I love digging that stuff too.
But like it's a fascinating idea.
What's that guy's name who wrote America before? Graham, I think Graham Norton, maybe.
Graham Hancock, maybe.
Hancock. Yeah, I know that's. I think he's written a few books, but he's all about like Disovian, the Clovis people. But he's one of these Atlantis guys. He's pretty sure.
But I love that idea. Like it could be totally wrong. I love the idea, but then also all of these old stories. And many of them disparate and not necessarily pertaining to like a single religion or anything.
Sure.
Like they all mention the Great Flood, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then like, is that just some sort of weird symbology, or was there one, or
were there a bunch of little floods, but they seemed big to the person that was there?
Yeah. Like who knows? And that's all really interesting. And the only way, like we're not getting that from a textbook, right? I mean, I guess the Bible kind of is.
Well, so that's the thing, right? How do you treat the books, right? Yeah. So
or
for
did
some
the Bible
people,
ruin the stories? Like that's the next question.
Yeah.
Right? Like is the Bible like a textbook? And like, what would the world be like if we hadn't written it down? Is another fascinating idea. Like, what would the stories sound like?
Yeah, and then you've also got we can also take cutting off we could take other paths too, where it's like, was it intended as narrative? Was it intended as a textbook? How does the way that we engage with the Iliad or the Bible or the Epic of Gilgamesh or whatever the old story is, right? How does the way that we engage with it now affect what it does to us as humans or as individuals?
Yeah, and then, by the way, that's a huge theme. It's a huge bagpiping theme as well. So
yeah, can you make this tie together for me? Because I'm so in the weeds. Pull me back.
Absolutely. So like the Pibroch is a perfect example of this. It's like how we engage with the music is totally different now than it was when Pibroch was actually being, was actually, let's call it like
was current,
popular.
Yeah.
So when it was popular, like picture Gaelic people before Culloden, right? When it was popular, the way people were engaging with the music was totally different than the way we engage with it now. It was like they didn't have Netflix back then. This is the way I choose to look at it. Maybe someone will come on and correct me someday, but like we didn't have Netflix back then, so like you played music for each other, and like this, it was sort of like a form of storytelling and sharing musical ideas and improvising, and it was just a super entertaining way of doing all those things.
Yeah.
And that's how you engage with it. Like think of it as like a social thing. Trying to think of similarities today. But meanwhile, how we engage with it today is totally different.
Yeah.
Usually competitive, and even if it's not, it's very like formalized one to many projection of a contrived setting of a tune that comes from a book.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like maybe I want to say like it's packaged in a way today that maybe like music in general, right? Like how long is a song? 2.5 minutes. Like, well, says who? But and maybe
Pibroch is way shorter now than it was before.
And that blows my mind, right? Because for me, being a modern human, Pibroch's long. It's a bit of a tolerance curve for me to even get into it because of how long it is, right? But that's because of my context, right? My context is, man, 3 minutes is pushing it,
Yes. Yeah, and it's just one of those things. It's just been, Pibroch is one of those things that was just sort of wiped from society's memory. And then I guess what was it? It was just the expansion of the British Empire sort of meant the extinguishing of a lot of these things. And obviously it's not a criticism because needless to say, we've experienced that in our culture as well.
Sure.
It's like this sort of like creeping hegemony.
Yeah. Yeah. The
pretty interesting to think about. And so like, and then the next question is how we are playing Pibroch now good or bad? And it's probably neither, but it's definitely totally different.
Definitely different, right.
And then if it's definitely different, is there actual merit to those who claim to have real knowledge of how the tune of how the tune is quote unquote supposed to go?
Yeah.
Which I definitely I'm not sure about. That's a mild way to put it.
Yeah, like from a purely like even just like simple surface level mechanical standpoint, what if the player's fingers had never been trained to do like a heavy throw? Like what if the player's fingers had not done thousands of reps on your modern standard E doubling? And then what if their instrument, like their grandpa had turned the chanter and they had found the reeds out in the marsh themselves, and there was one, maybe two drones, and they were tenor drones, what we would call today tenor drones. And then how would every single note interact with that drone, harmonically? Like just surface level, how much would be different,
The number of drones thing is fascinating. And again, I don't know if I'm correct on this, but I seem to recall in my reading that the 3 drones is not a given.
Right.
And the third drone is a fairly recent addition, which seems to have been brought about by the emergence of competitions.
Yes, Way Too Twag, Jeremy over at the Way Too Twag's Bagpipes and History podcast, I think it was just last year, did a really interesting episode where he brought up a few historical sources where people would show up to competitions at some point with their 2 drone sets and
They
be
wouldn't
turned
just
away.
show up. They wouldn't just show up. They would come and they would win.
Right, they were winning, absolutely, yeah.
And it was problematic because how can you give the prize money to this guy who's only playing two drones? I'm playing a bagpipe with 3, which is way more difficult to master, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they had to figure out, like they had to level the playing field.
Yeah.
And so they went with the 3 drone bagpipe.
Now, looking at that, Andrew, what do you think about like today's competition scene? I'm curious about a few things, and so feel free to attack these as you please. But
all right.
Just some things I'm curious about. Like first of all, like song form. Do we keep MSRs forever? Is the current library of what can be played sufficient? Does it need to be expanded? Do we need to switch some things out, etc.? I'm also curious about tuning, not just on competition day, for example. Should there be at least thresholds where all bands must be below so many hertz in order to play? And if you're above that many hertz, you're going to get a dock, right? You're going to get a strike on your scoring sheet. And also, tuning to notation. Will we reach a point where the bagpipe is reclassified as a B-flat sounding non-transposing instrument and our written music will reflect that, or something else? And then maybe if you want to, uniforms, are those necessary to maintain a competition setting? Go.
Okay, so the first one was...
And you don't have to tackle all of them, nor in order. Whatever thoughts come to your mind, Andrew. I just want to know what you think.
So the first one was musical format.
Yeah.
Okay. I think MSRs are just fine.
Mm-hmm.
I like them. Like, what other formats would you like? Would be a rebuttal to the idea that MSRs have to go.
Yeah, that's a fair question.
So, like,
yeah.
okay, so what are you going to replace it with?
Mm-hmm.
I do feel strongly, privately, that MSRs are not appropriate. No components of an MSR are appropriate for beginners.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, I feel like grade, let's say in the EUSPBA, grade 4 senior is the entry level, although now they have a grade 5, which is weird. I bet let's not go down that rabbit hole. But like at the entry level, we have people playing marches. Marches are really, really difficult. And I think that we should probably start with jigs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like in my mind, marches always seemed like the foundation, the most basic thing, maybe because we
Correct.
do parades and stuff, you know?
And that's why we do it. And that's why march is because people just kind of assume. But we have the opportunity to teach like thousands of people at a time on a daily basis. And I can tell you that jigs are easier. And that's what we should be going for at the entry level, right? We should be putting forward as few barriers to entry into the competitive art form as reasonably possible.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we could do that would be to just change up what the expectations are at the entry level.
You're making me question my assumptions all over the place, Andrew, because I now realize that I also don't think of jigs in a context as their own thing. I think of jigs and reels.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
well,
it's like,
round reels are identical to round jigs
mm-hmm.
with only one change, right? And the only difference is the number of, groove divisions per beat, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So a reel would have 4 and a jig would have 3. But other than that, they're extremely similar.
So jigs and reels would be the entry point rather than an MSR. Because I'm thinking like timed medleys are usually a collection of marches, right? And that's where we start, isn't it? So
Right.
Are we making a mistake with that, huh?
I think so. Yeah. And I also think that a slow march and a jig or something would be a better format for entry-level bands as well.
Do you think
there's a question of familiarity, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big question of that. So what gets people into it more? Like the fact that you can just transfer, but that's a huge problem though. It's like transferring the marches that you play on the street into a march medley. That invites a whole host of problems. It would be better to do something including a jig. And again, I'm not talking about a jig at 120 beats per minute.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a jig at like, how about maybe 90-ish?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the tempo of the jig that gives it the illusion that it's really difficult to play.
That's a good point.
But anyway, what are we trying to do here, right? And then what I'd like to do is introduce as many people as possible to all the benefits and excitements of competing, right? So we need to change some of the things.
That's a good attitude to have. I think too often we maybe by mistake end up like gatekeeping almost. And it's like, why would we do that?
That's exactly it. So the way we do things right now is we just filter for outliers.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if there's nobody for the outliers to play with, what you end up with is a really tight-knit, close-minded community of people that have difficulty progressing and don't have much support. Like, does that sound familiar?
Oh,
yeah, sounds really familiar. Especially in North America, it sounds really familiar, right? We cannot continue to just filter for outliers. That's what we do right now. Grade 4 in the USPBA asks for a full PBROC to be played.
Wow.
That is, you know, and again, I hope I don't put my credential at jeopardy by saying this, but that's just utter ridiculousness.
That is like in Waspaba, I solo at grade 4, grade 3 maybe, but I definitely can't play a whole PBROC, that's for sure. And so that makes me feel immediately inadequate and scared to think.
We cannot be asking beginners to play for 7 to 8 minutes continuously under pressure.
Under pressure, yeah.
And the reason why might surprise you. The reason why is that some people can do it. Right? And then who are those people? Those are the young Andrew Douglases and like the outliers, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So the only people, like you say, gatekeeping, the only people getting through are, extremely apt, rare outliers.
Yeah.
Right? And the rest get trapped sort of in like forever purgatory, where what they really need to do is, focus on the things that matter, allowing them to progress, at a more casual rate, let's say, but then eventually they might get the bug and maybe they're never going to win a gold medal. Like maybe if you're not, it might be true that only those super talented people eventually go through and win gold medals and world championships and stuff, but that's missing the point completely. It's like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right. Yeah.
Because basically the outliers just end up in grade 2 and grade 1 solos together and there's no one else there.
That's right. Yeah.
And there's no one there who loves the game, but can't progress. So instead decides to support the game. Like I think about baseball in that way. Like how many people are just out there who were never great baseball players, but they love the game. And then they are the ones who are there that hold the game up and build it into our culture and make it a really interesting, valuable thing. Yeah. Which by the really interesting, horribly boring, awful thing that I can't believe they put on television.
Baseball?
Yeah. But it's like, that's just an opinion. That's just an opinion that I have. Like, I don't love baseball, but for some reason it's like this beautiful and wonderfully integrated game into our culture. That's what we kind of need and want for piping, I think. Even chess, like chess is another great example. There's YouTube personalities that get millions and millions of views on every video they put out, and they're not great chess players. They're just good.
Yeah.
And they got through, right? Because there's not this weird gatekeeping thing where it's like, oh, if you can't beat Chess Master on hard mode as a beginner, then you're not going anywhere.
You have no right to even have an online presence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
You're just never gonna be seen because we're gonna filter you out early.
Right. Yeah. You can't even come to the competition, right? That's the.
Yeah. I mean, you could come, but like, what would be the point?
Right.
The other thing, like the other just shockingly obvious, awful thing is like one of the reasons I don't play solos anymore. There's several, but it's like when you play solos, no one comes to watch.
Yeah, so true. It's you and the judge.
It's you and the judge, which, by the way, has a variety of, there's a variety of negative implications of not having any witnesses.
Yeah.
Which is another reason I don't compete probably. But no one comes to watch. Like, what are we even doing? But why is no one coming to watch? It's because there's no one left that's really particularly interested, and it's because what we're doing doesn't actually make any sense, and it certainly pays no attention to the community that we should be trying to foster and to build.
Yeah. It almost starts to feel cartoonish, right? These like miserly, closed-minded, very few individuals like congratulating themselves and each other on having weeded out the rest, not realizing that like one generation later your organization disappears. All of these ideas are gone. It's like
I believe we're heading in that way fast. We're heading in that direction fast right now. Because when I was a kid and I played like grade 1 solos, there would be at least a few people that would come to watch.
Yeah.
Certainly they would watch the bands. When we had Oren Moore, 10 years or so ago here.
That's
in
the
East
band
Coast.
you started, right?
I didn't start it, no. But that was sort of the band that I grew up in.
Oh, gotcha.
And I remember we played in grade 1 and like no one came to watch. Maybe it was because we were all behaving like jerks. Maybe that was part of it. But that's probably what the real reason. But maybe not. But it's just weird. It's just weird. And like you said, it's like bizarre echo chamber at best.
Yeah.
Like that's a generous. I lost my word there.
I think I know what you're going
for. Generous. There you go. Generous way of looking at it. At
right.
best. Yeah.
There's I think I've probably already thoroughly stuck my foot in my mouth here, so I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. This is another bullet point I'm putting on the list for talking to that professor about pipe bands as religions. Because one thing that comes to mind is a religious commentator who I've encountered before who talks about how like looking at your revolutions or restorations or Protestant movement from Catholicism type movements within religions, how they're constantly splitting from each other and branching off and stuff. He suggested that like if you think of it like lava, there's an idea here that's like exciting, bright, it attracts people, but over time inevitably it will cake over, crust over, cool down, and become immovable and stuck in the shape that it is. And that's the point at which somebody needs a new lava flow to get something that can move again,
Yes. And the important thing is the movement, okay? The movement of the lava is the important thing. And the specifics are typically not that important. For example, should you play a heavy D throw or a light D throw?
Are you asking me? Because I'm not willing to put my neck out there on this question. I'm willing to talk about religion and stuff, but I'm not gonna opine on which.
You're not crazy, right? But the answer to that question is, it doesn't matter. That
just
detail
play music, right?
That detail is so utterly unimportant. And the important thing, right, is the movement of the lava, is the idea, right? And then so can you Angus McCall. I hope he doesn't mind me saying something like this. And the way he plays a D throw is neither heavy nor light, I would say. It's like a slightly different way of playing it. And it's part of his incredible approach to making music. And no one bothers him about it, I don't think. I don't think anyone minds that he produces amazing music with a different style of D throw.
Yeah.
Nobody minds, right? And the movement of the lava in this case would just be putting your head down and doing everything you can to express yourself in beautiful, interesting ways. That seems to be what's important.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the competition thing.
Yeah.
And let's pretend for a moment that you share the same opinion, about this weird stifling echo chamber, rapidly dying art form that we have here. Right?
Oh, go ahead and pretend. I already told you how cynical I am. You can just assume just about whatever you want at this point.
So if you wanted to turn things around, what might you do? Right? And I gave you one idea already, like the idea that the entry-level material could be simpler, could be thought through a little bit smarter. I think there are some other interesting things that could be entertained as well. But let's not go down there. And then a lot of the questions that you were asking me are basically all pointing at that idea, right? So should we change the music that we play? I think maybe, but I don't think MSR should go away. I think maybe if you heard some really great MSRs emerge, that might help you that might help you cope with the fact that they're probably here to stay. But like, if you hear ones that sound good, that would probably be better. And then what were some of the other questions?
Oh, limitations for tuning. Could we say no higher than so many hertz?
Right.
You must keep it within reason.
I think I've spoken on this before, but yeah, like I believe that the bagpipe should ultimately tune to concert B flat. Mm-hmm. Like,
but how long will it take us to get there?
Well, it might never happen, right?
I'm already worried about screwing my kids up. They're in piano lessons right now, but they're picking up the bagpipes, and I have to tell them like, okay, now forget some of the stuff you've learned because this has its own rules,
If you gave them a B flat chanter, which by the way, I wouldn't rule that out. Mm-hmm. Like that's, it's not like it would cause harm or anything. B flat chanter is very, very close. Holes might be like millimeters slightly farther apart, maybe. But yeah, that B flat chanter. I mean, what's so awesome about it is that it breaks down a lot of those barriers. So it takes the instrument where a lot of people assume it's like totally different from regular instruments, and it makes it, generally speaking, almost totally the same. Yeah. So like once you're in B flat, like, all the tunes that we play, you can play with any other kind of instrument. Right. Which is really kind of important. And by the way, it would be a really easy change to make.
Personally, I'd like to see us go all the way to concert A, but I know that that's really asking a lot. Even I'd settle for B flat. Yeah,
concert A is kind of a weird one. I don't really see any evidence that the pipes have ever really played in concert A. I think they probably started somewhere between A and B flat.
I believe you there. I mostly just have an easier time thinking in a key that has more white keys than black instead of starting on B flat. So that's really a personal.
There are lots of transposing instruments.
There are, and yeah, there's, especially you look at like a concert band, like brass and stuff like that. Like B flat's that's a solid place to go for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and B flat is like it would be extremely reasonable to just change the entire world to B flat. Mm-hmm. Like that's something that could happen. Probably not overnight, but it could happen within 365 days. For example, if the RSPBA said, by the way, starting in 2024, everyone needs to play in B flat. Let's just pretend that happened. People would just do it, and by 2024, it would be no problem, and Field Marshal would still have the best sound. And the best bands would still be the best bands, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm saying?
But would we Americans be like, look, we kept feet and miles. We're keeping the tuning as well.
Yeah, but that would be foolish, right? So again, it's like it's a barrier to entry thing. Yeah. So it's like the bagpiping art form, as we know it in North America, with the exception of really small pockets throughout the continent, but it's dying and seems to be dying fairly rapidly, right?
It's not just like we've talked about barrier to entry for people playing the instrument, but this one is a big barrier to entry for collaboration.
Yeah. Well, and it's a barrier to entry. Like you're never going to get bagpipes in schools. Right. If you can't tune it to a piano. Yeah. Like that's just not going to happen. So like why completely rule that out when it would be so simple to totally rule it in? It
feels like more of that filtering, more of being like, look, we say these are the rules, we say this is the way it is, you must comply to us, or too bad for you. And then we die out, right. Like why have that attitude?
Yeah, that's like it's like so super silly, yeah. Well, and I mean even insofar as like recruiting drummers and blah blah blah, and it's like if the bagpipes were more normalized and more workable. I mean, think about pop music too. It's like everyone makes pop music in their garage now, except you still can't use bagpipes because they don't tune to anything.
Right. And the few people who are almost always doing it in B flat.
Right. I mean, you have to go through either 49 excuses why you can't, or 49 minutes of changing all the instruments so you can.
Have you said that before, Andrew? Because that came out nice. That was good.
That was new.
I like that one.
But yeah, like every rehearsal, because I've played a lot of bagpipes in like rock bands and contemporary, and I've made a lot of pop music in my basement with bagpipes, and that's exactly it. It's like in order to do it, it requires insane amounts of setup or technical knowledge, or
a
but how
Blair
often is
Digital
that?
Chanter. This episode brought to you by Blair Digital. Not really, though. Hey
Yeah.
Blair, if you wanted to send me a digital chanter, I'd for sure give you some plugs. But
Yeah. I'm not sure he needs the plugs. The Blair Chanter is like so great, right?
Yeah.
It's a great product. And I'm not being paid to say that. Although I do know Murray pretty well.
though Murray, if you want to send Andrew some money, he'll say it some more.
I don't think he needs to do that. Yeah. So, but anyway,
Sorry,
it's a
I
great
didn't mean
product.
to throw you off the tracks there. Carry
But
on.
it's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons it is a great product.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
It's one
just
of
that
the
you can just
reasons.
click into being in tune with other instruments. It's
Yeah.
a big deal.
And like at minimum, it's so great for rehearsing.
Yeah.
Right. But then at maximum, like you could use it for live performance art and stuff like that. But yeah, anyway, back to the original point.
Yeah.
Like it would be so easy. And by the way, like even just like one tiny drop of courage, and no one would mind, right? Like the EUSPBA, for example, right? A tiny drop of courage, and the EUSPBA could say, "Hey guys, we're going to play in B flat now."
We're going to lead the charge.
Yeah. Like why do we have to be just like, especially because in other areas I know the attitude is screw everybody else and what they're doing. We're doing it our way.
Yeah.
Like, so why don't we do it our way in some
In a constructive way.
yeah,
Something that moves towards
constructively.
something good.
That's a
Yeah.
nice way to put it, right?
Yeah.
Why can't we lead the charge in constructive areas? Yeah, and B flat would just be obvious. Like it doesn't even change that much. You can order the Easy Drone low pitch reads.
Yeah.
And
Some pipes you can just tune out a bit and you're there.
some of them, yes. And then like, I think we'll have to get reeds that are made, but they have those already. It's like, it's not
Yeah,
that
they
big of a
exist.
leap, folks. And
You
like,
know something else that's cool, Andrew, that I don't know, might not have been on your radar. Dave over at the 3D printed bagpipes guy, he's been working on tuning pins that you could thread so you could unscrew them, take them out of your drones and put in slightly longer ones and just have your drones just go longer.
sure, that might work. Okay. But even with that, it's like, as soon as you start talking about that kind of thing, like now you're getting further from reality.
Sure,
Like
sure.
further
Like,
from
the core idea, right?
actually
Yeah.
being able to implement it in the greater world, let's say.
You know what else, Andrew? I don't know about where you are right now in the country, but the B-flat chanters that I've had sound better where I live.
Yeah. No, you are 100%, no doubt about it, correct. And by the way, I think most experts would agree that the actual tone of the instrument was better back when things were a little bit lower. I think so. I might be wrong. But
I sure
then
like it more, that's for sure. I definitely prefer playing on my B-flat.
the reason the pitch goes up, okay, so this will address your third question. The reason the pitch goes up over time, it's just basic human psychology. So when you hear two bagpipes, let's pretend two bagpipes absolutely exactly identical in quality, but if one is slightly higher in pitch, you will psychologically prefer that.
Makes sense.
And that's actually why they invented concert pitch.
Oh, to hold it steady because everything
Yes.
was creeping?
That's why concert pitch was invented.
Yeah.
Is because, and I think it was a Catholic Church thing.
That makes sense. Like
So people were
an
like,
organization with power that possessed the organs, basically.
yeah, and again, this is all, done is better than perfect, right? So my
Including
historical
on
knowledge,
research.
yeah, my historical knowledge is like in that same Venn diagram.
Yeah.
But like my general understanding is at a certain point, the Catholic Church was like, bros, you got to like quit it with tweaking the pitch of your organs upward.
Yeah.
And so they just said like, okay, I think there was some sort of conference and they all decided that A for something.
Yeah, this
And I
was
don't-
part of the Nicene Creed, I believe, was one of those
Yeah,
things that they were
exactly. Part of
debating there.
part of the Nuremberg
That's
trials
it,
or something. Yeah. I can see the book. I can see the book right now that has it in it, but we don't have to get that nerdy today. But anyway, I read it somewhere. I think I see where I read it from.
That's
But
the thing.
it's a thing. And so anyway, they did it. We could do it too. So, but I absolutely 100%, no doubt about it, think that pipe band associations, let's say, like part of the rule set should be what your pitch should be.
Yeah.
your acceptable range of pitches.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be practical outdoors with this temperamental instrument, right? To say it must be exactly this pitch, right? But at least a range, right?
Well, yeah, and that's and you'd have to get into the weeds slightly on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be probably as simple as what temperature it is, and then your acceptable range of pitches should slide up and down depending on what the ambient temperature is.
Yeah.
But then it does get tricky. There's no doubt about it. This is probably why they haven't done it.
Surely you would have some people being like, oh, we played the best, but because of this and this stupid rule, that's what made it so we couldn't win.
And in Scotland, right? Have you ever been?
I haven't been personally, but I've watched plenty of Worlds to know that the weather does.
No, you can't watch it. You have to, when you're there, it's remarkable. And it seems to be different, way different than it is here. So the difference between the temperature difference between when a cloud covers the sun and when the sun comes out, it could be literally a 15-degree swing, like within moments.
Yeah.
Right. And so that makes it tricky. So what if we have our temperature and we have this mandated pitch thing, but then the sun comes out?
Then the mandated pitch probably has to slide accordingly, huh?
So you'd have to probably track it, because you can't ask a band to retune the entire band in final tuning.
Yeah.
So it's not really quite reasonable. So you would probably have to you'd have to have some method of measuring what the band actually is. Mm-hmm. And you would have to have some method of monitoring what the actual temperature is. And then there would have to be some kind of range. But I think it's totally worth it. And then I also think that you should just combine that with the general B flat idea. And then suddenly you have competitive utopia, right?
Yeah.
So it's like at 70 degrees, you should be within 3 hertz of B flat, right? And then if the temperature is 80 degrees, you should be within 3 hertz of some number that would be slightly higher.
Yeah, or within, just expand it from B flat, within 12 hertz of B flat, right? Just expand the range maybe based on how extreme the weather's getting.
Sure. Yep. And it's really just a question of the pitch going up. It's not really a question of the pitch going down.
Yeah.
So it would be no more than 3 hertz higher than B flat for standard room temperature environments. And then, as the heat goes up, and then you need to do it as the heat goes down too.
Yeah.
Because it is true, Field Marshal, I remember when we played in SFU, we would always be trying to get in the same pitch ballpark as FM, because they were just always ever so slightly sweeter. Mm-hmm. But a big component of that is that their pitch was ever so slightly higher. That's a huge weapon. It really is.
Yeah.
And the problem is not that that's a huge weapon. The problem is that over time, the pitch has been going up and up and up and up, and it's literally changing the physics of the instrument. Right.
When you start getting chanters that won't play down anymore, they're being manufactured to play up, it's definitely...
Yep. And then the whole spacing is getting closer together, and it's changing. And some of the basic physics of how the chanter actually works, I think is more and more challenging. The actual stability that you want and sort of need to achieve a high level of tuning, it's getting harder and harder to reach that stability, which may or may not be 100% true. It might just be a case of reed making, having to catch up with the new design of chanters and blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But what's really going on is we're focusing on things that are not important at the expense of the things that are important.
Yeah. Now, Andrew, that right there makes me think of another thing I wanted to ask you about, which is your approach with the dojo, your approach to education, where it seems that your focus is forget about your water trap until you can blow steady, at least, right?
Yeah. What does a water trap do?
Traps water?
Maybe. And then are you sure?
Well, here's the thing. I took mine out 6 months after I got my pipes, and I haven't used one since then. So I live in a very dry climate. So I don't.
And then even if
it gets in the way, is that what it does? It just gets in the way and makes it hard to blow up your bag.
That's what I want to know. I want to know if you know what that thing actually does.
Yeah.
And if you do, And then you've calculated all the pros and cons, because there are pros and there are cons to every one of those gadgets that you put in your pipes, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know that you are in control of those pros and cons, and you've made calculated decisions, and that you have an awareness, and that your decisions are moving you in the direction of better and better music making, which is very rare for any of those gadgets.
It feels like maybe there's another sort of like, I don't know, a similarity of ideas here, where with your interest in CrossFit, where like, does a person start taking supplements before they've done their first push-up, or do they get, like, the supplements don't come in until you're at the last like 0.5% of a difference, right? If even then, right? And so like,
and then at that point, are the supplements a placebo, or are they actually helping?
Right.
Like, exactly.
So
Exactly right.
so if there's a similar thing like applied to competition and to piping in general, that seems to be, feel free to correct me or expand on this if you'd like, but like the focus of Dojo is in a lot of ways clear away the clutter. Here are the things to focus on. Now, after you focused on those for years and totally have them down, maybe there's room to bring in some of these supplements, as it were. But there's no point focusing on those in the meantime. They're getting in the way. Get them out of the way.
Yep. So, the best music I've ever heard, the best bagpipe music I've ever heard, none of it had a Ross canister bag tied in. None of it. Zero of it. And like, you might be saying, well, all of the good players nowadays are playing it. Yeah, but when's the last time you heard a truly moving performance on one of those instruments? And it might be just my bias and everything factoring in, right? Because I have a bias at this point.
Yeah.
But like, no, like Jack Lee played the best P-Rock I've ever heard. It was Desperate Battle of the Birds, 1998, Stonehill College. That's the best P-Rock I probably ever heard. But he was decidedly playing sheep and cane drone reeds. And that's almost 100%, no doubt about it, a key contributing factor to why that P-Rock was so wonderful. It's because I had never heard a bagpipe like that. So in 1998, the world was in the middle of the Ross canister rage era. The invention, it had been recently invented, and we were all hooked.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying their Ross canister systems are useless. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
That's
Ross,
0%.
if y'all are listening, if you want to send Andrew some money, we'll stop saying these things, right?
Yeah. You can send, if you have any hate mail, you can send it to dojo@bigrabshow.com.
There you go.
But that's not what I'm saying. We were all hooked though. So we were literally hooked into the hoses, all the bagpipes. And like, so as a young player, that was the sound I was used to hearing.
Yeah.
And then Jack Lee showed up.
You heard a naked bagpipe for the first time in your life.
Exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what happened. And it was mind-blowing. And it should be noted for the record, I was 100% in denial.
Oh, really?
For years.
Couldn't be.
So Jack started coming around the Invermark schools beginning in the summer of 1999, I think, is what it would have been, actually, 1999. I met Jack in 1998. He judged at the Nickel Brown, and I won the Nickel Brown that year, and it was like kind of out of the blue, out of nowhere. Was not 0% expected. But anyway, but then I got to meet him at the schools, and I learned from Jack. And for the first couple of years at the schools, Jack would say crazy, outlandish things like, if you tied a sheepskin bag on your pipes, you would learn about real bagpipe tone. He would say, I'm paraphrasing. He said it way more artfully than that. And, I would just think to myself, like, this guy is just being kind of ridiculous, and maybe he's just trying to be dramatic or something. But finally, when I joined the SFU pipe band and, they mandated that I play a sheep, I mean, it was instantly obvious. Right? That it was just far better, far superior quality of tone.
Yeah.
Now that would be that would be one of the cons of the Ross canister system, right? Is that you sacrifice quality of tone significantly when you tie that in. Now there are pros as well. Like the obvious one is if you take care of your kitty litter, you never have moisture anymore. So that's an obvious upside, because moisture is difficult to handle with the instrument.
And for some people, maybe especially in like a gigging situation or something, then having a consistently functional tool might outweigh the value of that enhancement of tone. And so there might be perfectly good reasons to go, oh no, I'm going with the full canister system.
Yeah. So a professional gigging, high level player, like that might be something worth exploring, maybe. Right? Yes.
That's
but
all
it's
the
still,
further you're going to go on down that road, huh?
Yeah, but like, what's the real reason your bagpipe is getting wet? Is it because you need moisture control or because you don't know what you're doing?
Yeah.
And you haven't learned. And by the way, why haven't you learned? It's because you've been busy nuking your rocks and trying to find, the hole in the hose and figuring out why the zipper's leaking. And then don't forget, you got to lubricate the zipper. And then, oops, you lubricated the zipper, but you accidentally nudged one of those tone enhancers out of position. And then, and then but don't forget, you had to try 13 new digital tuners this year to figure out, you know what I'm saying? Like
it takes up so much time you actually didn't play, right?
You're focusing on what doesn't matter at the expense of what does.
To be clear, so it doesn't sound like I'm only being critical. I myself only took my tone enhancers out maybe a year ago. I've had tone enhancers in my pipes for 15 years.
And the irony there is you take the tone enhancers out and then your tone instantly gets better.
It gets enhanced. It's like, wait, what?
Wait. Yeah. The tone enhancers are like particularly egregious because that's not what they do. So like
mislabeled, right?
They should have been called. What is a tone enhancer? A tone enhancer is an air restriction valve.
Oh, see, I was going to say it's a reed catcher in case your reeds fall out.
Yeah, well, there's always the side benefits. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like the problem when you restrict the air, which by the way is, I think, why the Ross canister system decreases the quality of tone, is because it also restricts the airflow to the reeds. So by restricting the airflow, you get a smoother airflow, right? You have sort of a restriction valve in there that's sort of moderating the airflow. So so you can regulate the airflow slightly, which is cool, which is not actually cool because you're never going to learn to blow steady if your unsteady blowing seems to result in steady output
sound. Yeah.
Right. So you're covering up the problem. You're not addressing the problem. Right.
Yeah.
But then with that restriction of air, any experience with reeded instruments will tell you that when you restrict the airflow, it decreases the harmonic response.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like
that totally
you can
makes
just
sense.
play your practice chanter. You can just play your practice chanter and explore that phenomenon.
Yeah,
right?
I'm immediately taken back to junior high school band class and telling us about how like look at this target on the wall and move air that direction. Like you need more air moving through your horn.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of fun stuff, like air support and like, embouchure and all that. It's like, and all that plays a role in good bagpipe sound production as well, but not if there's an array of hoses and tubes and stuff.
Getting in the way.
Yeah. And again, maybe someday down the road, you will find a use for those tools that, is the right decision. But there's trade-offs. And as a beginner, right, those things are not appropriate.
Don't hit the juice as a beginner. Do some push-ups as a beginner, right?
It would be like giving a second grader a calculator and trying to teach them math. What do? They don't allow the calculator because that would be a really irresponsible thing. It's also the same reason, folks, if you're listening, you should not give your 5-year-old a phone, for God's sakes. Oh my God, it's so horrifying walking around the world and seeing all of these 5-year-olds like literally with cell phones.
But how do you really feel about that, Andrew?
It's awful. Yeah. You're willingly destroying the future of that child. Because like the phone is like a really poignant example of the same phenomenon.
Have you had this experience with your kids that my wife and I notice about ourselves, that like having our kids present makes us more aware of how bad our habits are with our phones? When my very small child has told me to put my phone down, it's like, oh man, like
it's tough.
Yeah. Like they're like, put the phone down and listen to me. It's like, not that they can say it that way, but that's what they're getting at. It's like, wow, where am I?
And like, the phone is like the perfect, most horrifying distillation of what I was saying, which is it forces you to focus on what doesn't matter at the expense of what does. So
You're kind
you're
of
on your
breaking
phone.
my heart a little bit, Andrew.
I know. You're on your phone, right? And you're comparing and despairing with everyone you know on social media.
Yeah.
And you're keeping yourself ultra polarized politically and like, you know, putting all your blinders up and getting mad and angry and increasing your stress and doing all this stuff in a realm that's completely not controllable to you at all.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, your kid is just plopped in front of the TV or their own device.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? That's not it. That's not going to get us to the result that we want. Let's bring this back to bagpiping. It's the same, right? So it's like, are digital tuners bad? No, but they're definitely not good either. Like, what's the goal here? The goal here is to learn how to tune.
Oh,
right?
so you're thinking like you want to see that needle moving so you get more of a feel? Is that what you're...
And the idea that the digital tuner can tell you if you're in tune or not, that's a false idea. That's not what it does. That's not even what it does.
Yeah, well, how many times have any of us, like, our tuner is saying you're bang on, but we play and we go, but it doesn't sound right, you know?
That's right. And how do you know it doesn't sound right? It's not because the tuner told you it did or didn't, right? The tuner can only report what's actually happening to you, and it can't even really do that. So that, you know, it's like all of these tools, right? We need to delay the gratification, if that's even what it is, of using those tools. Until we actually understand what they're for, and we actually understand what the trade-offs are. Yeah. Which, by the way, you know, that's why people stop using our service. Let's say, it's like they're looking for the shortcuts, but that would be
it takes too long.
Yeah, and it's not actually a shortcut.
Yeah,
it's like a shortcut to hell, basically.
Have you found it a difficult thing to balance being a guy who is selling a product online in online spaces to not have yourself personally sucked into those, you know, chasing likes and eyeballs and stuff like that? Like, you know, like what am I trying to say?
I know what you're trying to say.
You know, your personal life being consumed by the likes and follows, you know, while you are trying to occupy that online realm, you know, to sell your product. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yes.
Do you have like personal practices where like I only use, you know, social media for these hours of the week on this device, or, you know?
So the answer to that question is that I don't allow myself to have any social media on my phone. So because I need it for the business,
right?
I need a lot of those tools. I will allow myself to have it on my computer if I want to bring it up on the web browser or whatever. But I cannot allow it on my phone anymore.
Is that from personal experience, or did you just see it with awareness and go, that's not going to be good news for me?
It's both.
Yeah.
But yeah, personal experience, you know.
Yeah.
I was an early adopter of most of these technologies. And then like it ends up defining you. It's like I just sit there and I scroll and I scroll and I scroll. And as I scroll, and you could ask yourself this question too, I'm sure you already have. It's like, are you getting happier as you scroll?
Never, yeah.
Are you getting better? And by the way, like I find that podcasts make me better. So I definitely still have podcasts on my phone. Like I think that's a great medium and like really, really cool. And same with audiobooks. Like that, those two things might be the reason I don't get rid of my phone altogether.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, like I don't hate social media. I just have to very carefully control it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it is cool and useful. And Facebook is awesome. It's an incredible, incredible technology.
It's interesting that it's yet another tool that's not bad in and of itself, but if you understand what it's for
not
and
just
use
not
it the
bad.
way it ought to be, it's great.
That's right. It's not just not bad. It's like miraculously beautiful, incredible, awesome.
Yeah.
It's what it is. It's so amazing, but we don't understand the downsides of it. And it's not like there's no stories like going back to like encoded stories about morality, right?
Right.
Like there's no encoded stories built into culture across thousands of years warning us about the dangers of social media, right?
So we've got the Epic of Gilgamesh, but we have yet to write down the Epic of Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah. Yeah.
But centuries from
Exactly.
now, perhaps.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, a lot of people are Elon Musk haters, but like what we're learning with the Twitter, like change of ownership, you know, like it doesn't matter what side of the issue you're on. It's extremely important for our culture moving forward. It's
Yeah.
like we're learning a lot of extremely important lessons, I think, based on what's going on
Yeah.
with Twitter. And by the way, like we learned a lot of cryptocurrency lessons this year too. You know, like
Yeah,
but like
it's-
all of
it's
these
been
technologies,
a year of learning, hasn't it?
yeah, but like all of these technologies are like gut-wrenchingly amazing and so incredible.
Yeah.
Like they really are.
Yeah.
Like they're so great. Humanity, it has a potential to be progressed like so incredibly far from all this stuff. I really do believe it. Like I'm an optimist,
Yeah.
but I'm also a realist in the sense that like a lot of that stuff is just really, really bad. And by the way, and then I think your original question was kind of like, do I experience cognitive dissonance between the two things?
Mm-hmm.
There was an element of that. And the answer is absolutely I do. Because it's like, because I use all of this fancy technology to market and promote and operate my business. But then like the main thesis of what we teach at the dojo is, you know, to get all the way back to basics and try to actually learn those things.
Yeah. Using the technology to point people back towards something that's not, it's like you're utilizing the gadget in their hand to say, now put this gadget down and focus on something that's not the gadget.
Yeah. That's wild. I think it's okay because I think the technology is good if you're using it for the right reasons. And I don't mean right. I don't mean right morally. I mean right as in like pointing in the direction of what you consider to be good.
Well, sure, and I think maybe also you could say right as in like most correct or most effective use. Like you could use a screwdriver to knock a nail into a board. You could, you absolutely could, but it could be even better utilized. And there's another tool that could be better utilized for that task. And so,
yeah, and you can also use a screwdriver for terrible things.
True enough.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's the question, and you know, it's a really interesting question, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, are guns good or bad?
Oh, you went there. I see. I was like,
no, but I mean, guns is like the perfect example, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, guns are bad because they kill people. Well, hang on a second. You know, it's like, that's not just it. And social media isn't just bad. It's actually incredible.
I certainly, like, some of the deepest and most meaningful relationships with humans that I have are with people who I only know via social media. And, like, what would my life be without those people? It would be not as great as it is. It definitely has had an enriching effect for me.
Yeah. Oh, and it goes many layers deep, too.
Not to mention Dojo. Whom among us would even know of it? How could it exist without the internet and social platforms and stuff? I love the 100-day challenge Facebook group, you know?
Oh, that's funny because I don't love that group anymore.
You don't love it? I like just seeing like the effort, the check-ins, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't like the infiltration of bagpipe status seekers.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. So maybe you don't get as excited about the people who say I'm on day 390, but they sound maybe maybe it's the focus is maybe in the wrong spot. Once again.
You know, that's exactly it, right?
That makes sense. Yeah.
If you are at day 100, if you're at day 390, and you're still posting on this group, and again, I'm going to have to backtrack here in a second. But if you're still posting on day 390, you are misunderstanding the purpose to begin with.
It's interesting. It feels almost like this is another stuck in adolescence thing.
Absolutely.
It does have its purpose,
a trinket,
but you're supposed to move on from it. You're not supposed to stay there forever.
That's right. And we've moved on at the dojo. We've moved on from the 100-day challenge because it's not actually because it's not actually achieving the correct result. So the idea of it is obviously like, you know, it doesn't make sense to work on your Terlewis if you only play your bagpipes once every 4 weeks.
Right.
So let's play at least a tune on our pipes every single day and get into that habit. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's like once you're in the habit, you need to, you know, the next step is to augment that, not to see how many days you can string together.
Yeah.
Right. Is like, once it becomes like this weird, like it's a totally weird, bizarre kind of pathetic thing to hang your hat on. Right. It's like saying, bro, I'm better than you because I brush my teeth for 390 days straight.
But then maybe there's no toothpaste on the brush or something like that.
Well, or like.
But maybe what you're getting at more is like the assessment that I'm better than you in the first place because of a thing.
And it's like, and in this case, it's not even. In this case, it's just like the ante in the poker game.
Oh yeah.
It's not even, you're not even playing poker yet, right? So it's like, once we are actually in the habit, congratulations. That's a huge milestone. Good for you. But then what?
Then what? Yeah. You know, like, we've already offended midsections and talked religion and guns even. So I'm going to go ahead and also say, like, here's another bullet point on my list for the religion thing, right? It's like, are you going to carry around a status symbol that actually doesn't mean much? You know, it's like the hedging up the way kind of thing, right? Whereas, are you, if I may use the phrase, is this a letter of the law, but you're not living the spirit of the law situation?
Yes.
But I cut you off. Go on, Andrew.
No, that's exactly it. And so, like, the 100-day challenge, it's cool. And I absolutely 100% believe and think that if you're not playing your pipes every day, I actually don't play my pipes every day, but purposefully.
Scandal.
Okay. Scandal alert. Yeah. We could talk about that if you want.
You'll have to listen 2 hours to get the real juicy stuff here.
Yeah, but it's like, it's the same idea. It's daily action versus massive action. So if you're not doing something, if you're not doing this bagpiping thing daily, right? And I'm not talking about playing your practice chanter. I mean, like, bagpipers. Let's play our bagpipes daily. If you're not doing that, nothing further up the chain is gonna turn out particularly well for you. Right? So it's like, it doesn't, you're not going to fix your heavy D throw problem. See how I snuck that in? You're not going to fix that unless you're playing regularly and you have a relationship with your instrument and it's actually integrated into your day-to-day life. That's what the 100-day challenge is really all about.
Yeah.
So for those who understand that, good for you. But it's like, you know, now you've done that. Now you've done that for a while. It's a habit. You start to feel weird when you don't play. That's cool. We like that. But then what? It's like, then you need to take it from just doing the bare minimum to making the bare minimum maybe slightly more. Right. And we need to kind of work up to that and then we get to the point where on a day-to-day basis, I don't think great pipers are playing for 2 hours every single day. I don't think that's definitely not my experience. Some people at the absolute most elite maybe do that at key moments during the year.
In prep for a competition, maybe.
Yeah, maybe at strategic. But like, I think the minimum is going to be something like thoughtful, focused playing for 15 to 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, that tracks with my experience. Best piper I've ever known is my buddy Zach. And when we were kids, he played for hours a day. But by the time he was soloing in grade 1, nope. It's a few minutes here and there. He'd pick his solo on his way to the competition, really.
Maybe, and maybe that's not, and maybe that's not a best practice, but it probably represents like minimum to be successful. And it's probably different for different people. It's probably different depending on what kind of mood they're in, you know? Yeah. But like, yeah. So you reach, what we need to do is develop a minimally viable set of daily actions.
Yeah. It's like the tiny habits thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be minimally viable because it's not really that important what you do when you're in the mood to do it. What's important is what you do even when you're not in the mood.
Oh, yeah. Totally makes sense. Yeah.
You following what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Like, that's what's actually important. So what is the minimally viable set of habits that I have to keep my piping moving in the direction that I want it to move? Yeah. Well, it's like, okay, we can start with that. We can start with, okay, no matter what happens, I'm going to get the pipes out and play at least one tune every day. Like, that's a great place to start. But like, as you progress, we need to try and go a little bit beyond that. It's like, now I'm going to get the pipes out. I'm going to spend a few minutes getting them, like, let's say, just an example. Like, now I'll spend a few minutes getting them in tune every single day. Okay. And now it's like, now I'm going to spend a few minutes, I don't know, playing playing a specific set of a specific piece of my repertoire, or maybe keeping it on a nice rotation, like at bare minimum.
Right.
And then, but then also we do need to kind of like pare things down to focus on really what's super important, because like on a day where, on a day where you're having an argument with your wife and, you didn't have enough to eat and you're really tired and you didn't sleep well the night before because your kids were sick, you still got to play if you're serious about this.
Right.
Sorry, folks. Or if it's Thanksgiving and you got the whole family coming over at 11, you got to get your playing in before then.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not Thanksgiving, but like, what about the Friday after Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
It's like, you got to play. And if you don't play, and if you don't play Thursday or Friday, what are the odds you're going to play on Saturday?
It really snowballs or de-snowballs, as it were, pretty quickly. Yeah.
And then suddenly you get to the point where, it's time to start practicing for St. Patrick's Day, and I haven't played since before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And then, did you get any better in that time? Nope. You probably got worse, actually.
Well, and then it can have this like self-perpetuating negative aspect too, because then at that point, the idea of getting your pipes out again, that it's going to be harder than it was the last time you played before Thanksgiving. And so then it's like, well, now I don't really want to even, and the tuning's going to be all off. My muscles are going to be weak,
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
There's a momentum thing, isn't there?
And then, and so what's more important, learning about deep and meaningful light and shade, strong, weak, medium, weak, Strathspey expression, or just making sure you got your pipes out today and then you did something.
Yeah.
And then, and then over time, we want to increase the thoughtfulness of it. And by the way, CrossFit definitely taught me that lesson really nicely. It's like, you just got to get in the car and you got to show up there.
Yeah.
That's step one. And then once you get in the habit of that, and it's obvious that that's what you're going to do every day, then you can start saying, okay, cool. Now I'm going to
work on your form.
Yeah.
What do they call the wild pull-ups with CrossFit?
The kipping pull-ups?
Is that the one where you do the full body thing? The muscle up. I think that's the one I'm thinking of, where you do the worm in the air kind of thing. Yeah,
you got to deprioritize the muscle up. And then you also need to deprioritize the intensity. And you deprioritize all those things, because first and foremost, what's important is like the habit of doing it. Doing something is infinitely better than doing nothing.
So get there first.
Yep.
Get the pipes out.
And most
first.
pipers don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Most pipers don't do that.
Yeah.
They, they read the blog articles and they watch the YouTube videos, which, by the way, is important.
Yeah.
But then and then they play the practice chanter, but never quite get around to it.
Mm-hmm.
Never get around to the meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting. Yeah. Pretty interesting. And that's why, and really it's really just evolution that's resulted in the dojo. That's become our main thesis. It's just evolution. We started like everybody else starts, teaching the deep and meaningful expression and, how to be successful on the heavy left foot and how to tune a pipe band and et cetera, et cetera. But what's the real problem with pipe bands? It's like the real reason a pipe band can't progress has nothing to do with pipe band craft.
Or at least that's later. We got to get past the other stuff first.
But it's not even true. I mean, what's the reason Inverary was second at the Worlds this year and not first? It doesn't really have to do with our craft. It has to do with the fact that the individuals in the band needed to be slightly better prepared.
Yeah.
And that's possibly myself included. But I think even in the band, if anyone in the band hears this, I think they'd probably agree. Where things came apart, it didn't have to do with what we were doing as a band. It had to do more with, issues with individual bagpipes, let's say, or individual preparedness. And it was difficult this year because they're coming back from COVID and all that. So maybe a little bit of that's to be expected, et cetera, et cetera. But but that's the case in the lower grades too. It's is the problem with the band the tempos? Is it the breaks? I don't know if you've ever been in a pipe band, but at least 45% of the time in a pipe band, you're working on the breaks, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Got to work on those breaks.
Yeah.
I say, screw the breaks, man. like we really, really, really don't need to work on the brakes. Because you're working on the brakes with half the pipe band, right?
Right. Yes. It's not. Yeah. There's
you don't have
definitely
band
some people who aren't
practice.
that focused. They're not there yet, right?
Or they're just not there.
Yeah.
Like the real problem with pipe bands is that only 20% of the band shows up.
Yeah. Or even some of those who show up don't show up.
Yeah, and like we need those people in the band, right? Because if the people who never show up, if we ask them to leave the band, we wouldn't really have a band anymore.
Right.
Except you only ever practice with the number of people that show up, which begs the question, like, what kind of band do you want?
Yeah.
Which begs, you know what I mean? And it's really difficult. And people experience it at all levels. And it contributes to bagpipe status disease as well.
Yeah.
Because there are no consequences for me not showing up. Therefore, I'm some kind of hotshot. And why would I change my behavior?
Yeah.
And the irony is only
irresponsible in a way.
Well, and the irony is only revealed later, right?
Yeah.
When you go to the competition, you get your butt kicked by bands who you don't consider to be as good as you, except they are. They're actually way better because they actually show up. But you get your butt kicked by the guys who are able to actually show up.
They're showing up, yeah.
And then you storm off the field in disgust. Like only then is the irony revealed. Oh my God. What are we going to do this year to get the results that we want, like to move the band forward? I really want to see improvement this year. And like everything, we consider everything, and we do it really hard in order to avoid the fairly obvious truth, which is that individuals aren't doing what would need to be done to move things forward.
Yeah.
And that's not a personal assault on people. It's just facts, right?
No,
so
it makes sense.
If you only came to 3 out of 4 practices, if you only came to 1 out of 4 practices all winter long as a habit, then how can the band, and by the way, that's all random. It's not like you come on the first Saturday of every month. That might actually be better. Something bands should consider, right? Which is like during the off season, stop trying to rehearse twice a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's not a sustainable thing. It's not realistic.
Out, yeah.
It would be way, way, way better to say, please rehearse on your own, get some lessons, work on some solo stuff, and we'll see you, the first Saturday of February to get ready for St. Patrick's Day.
Well, even before showing up for only 1 out of 4 practices, like what is each individual doing at home every day, right?
Well, and they're not doing what they should be doing because they're probably focused on the guilt of not actually wanting or being able to go to 2 practices a week.
Yeah. Another self-perpetuating negative cycle. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned early on the idea of like toddlers playing next to each other and then not really playing together, more fighting more often, but sometimes playing together, as they get older and stuff. It does make it, I feel like there's something interesting here, like thinking of like child development where like we seem to think, I believe the current idea is that very young babies don't have individuation yet. They don't perceive themselves as separate from their mother. Typically, it's like we are one unit, and then there's everything else. And
it makes total sense to me. I mean, you've had kids, so it's like the bottom line with babies, there's nothing going on at first.
How dare you?
No, it's not like like when a baby smiles at you, they're really just farting.
Yep, it's just gas.
Yeah, like when you have kids, you realize that it's like oh okay. And
when they hug you, it's usually by accident. They're not holding your hand. That's just a monkey falling out of a tree response. That kind of stuff.
We take all that stuff for granted, right?
Yeah.
We take all that stuff for granted, but like no, it took your kid 3.5 months to just roll over onto their stomach.
Yeah.
Right. And then meanwhile, going to 1 practice every month is gonna contribute to your pipe band. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I'm just
anyway. So continue with your point, though. I feel like I interrupted that.
No, not at all. You're making the point. Absolutely. That like it just seems to me like if you're looking at a child, like they start out unable to conceive of the idea of themselves as an individual. Then they enter individuation and they begin to be able to perceive that they are an individual. And often then there's a phase where it's like, I am the center of the universe. I'm the only individual, right? Mm-hmm. It's only me, and everybody else is a sort of like amalgamation of everything else, right?
Yeah.
But it's only through complete individuation that they can eventually develop to a point where they can, in a productive way, participate in cohesive play with other individuals.
Yes.
You know, and so like I feel like there's something similar happening with pipe band participation where like really early on in the journey, you might not actually have the skills or ability to understand
You
as
definitely
separate.
don't have them.
Right. And so then eventually you get to where you can hear yourself as separate, but you must keep going in order to then be able to integrate yourself back into something that's bigger. If you get stuck on that individual thing, you get maybe some of that, maybe a lot of those sort of negative things. The adolescence phase maybe is where it's like, here I am and I'm a rock star. I don't know. Maybe I'm pulling too many things together.
Beautiful. It's beautiful because like the other thing that comes to my mind is what is play? So we're talking about the kids, right? And eventually they get to the point where they can play together. But like, what is it? What is playing?
Yeah, what is it?
And playing is, right? Playing is like this awesome realization that when I put my creativity together with yours, it multiplies, right? Like the result multiplies the two creativities together. Like it's way, way more than the sum of the parts.
Right. 1 + 1 is 3, right?
Yeah. And like, that's what play is. It's like incredible, right? It's like this incredible realization that you can have, right? But it takes it. And when you have kids, you learn this like the hard way for a long period of time. It's like that process takes a really long time.
Yeah.
And by the way, grown-ups, we totally destroy that process, right? Like when
we get in the way.
Yeah, and and it's so hard. Like I'm such a control freak.
Yeah.
Just unless I'm really, really purposeful. Like if the kids start fighting, I get in there right away and break it up. But it's like within reason, it's like such an important part of the process because every time you break it up, you destroy the chance that that they'll get one, like some of those really nice, multiplying moments where like the play is like really, really incredible. But it's like, okay, that's what pipe bands is.
Yeah.
That's why we do it. Every now and then you get this amazing, like exponentially explosive creative output.
Yeah. Something that was bigger than all of us.
Yeah. Well, way, and not just bigger, like just way bigger, like super, super awesome.
And you get those little tastes, and that's what keeps you there, isn't it? You keep chasing it. You want to find it again.
But the important thing is like those when you're in a beginner band, okay? So a beginner band, like a grade 5 or a grade 4 band, those are beginner bands, right? And why do I say that? Well, it's because those moments that you get where the output is actually good are still accidental. Right? And they're just the result of like, accidentally things coming together a little bit at the right time. And the idea is that we want to become more purposeful about that over time.
Yeah.
Such that like in a band like Inverary, you get that whenever you purposefully put all the pieces together, it's gonna happen. Right? And so, I think the first thing is just adopting that beginner's mind and realizing that when you're in a band, it's all just babies, right? We're all little musical babies. And that's not bad. I'm not saying something bad. I'm just telling you what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't know what you're doing yet. Okay, cool. First of all, embrace that. You don't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You just don't. It's just a thing, right? And then so like, how would you, if you were a baby that didn't know what it was doing, what would you do? Like you don't really have a choice when you're a baby, but you're sort of like immersed in an environment with lots of adults.
Right.
And people
Observing,
who can,
right?
Yeah. And adults. And by the way, like different adult environments result in different styles of toddlers, don't they?
Certainly. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, so you would be immersed, you would be mimicking, you would be, by the way, just like trying to figure out how to move yourself through space so that you can do like some things, so you can go like do some things that you want to do, and eventually like you learn how to walk around, and you're controlling yourself through space, and you might be learning like the basics of speech and all that stuff, and that's a process that takes time. And then you want to try to become more and more purposeful over time. And then in pipe bands, 80% of us in beginner level pipe bands do none of those things, right? Like they just don't do any of it.
Yeah.
And then we expect, and then there's 20% that sort of get it, that is what needs to happen, and they sort of do it. But if you have 80% of people not doing it and 20% sort of doing it, what is the result going to be? It's not going to be anything.
Yeah.
And that should be obvious.
You're not going to have that magic moment.
Yeah. And then, so what are you going to do to solve that problem? And then people just do the wrong things. It's like, oh, like let's hire a famous bagpiper to come in for a long weekend and work with the band. That's like obviously the furthest thing from what's actually
It's
needed.
like having,
I mean,
it's like having Einstein come and lecture a room of toddlers, right?
Yeah. And it's true. No, like maybe it's not all bad. That's not what I'm saying. Like having that person in there might light a fire under a couple people's butts.
Sure.
You know, and maybe that's a little nudge out the door that the whole band needs to get the boulder rolling down the hill. Like maybe. Okay, maybe. But it seems to me like there's drastically higher percentage things you could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
focusing
you need
on,
to somehow inspire 80% of your band.
right. Flip that over on its
You need
head.
to flip it. You need to inspire 80% of the band to do what the 20% was doing, which is like more or less generally working on their individual skills so that they can contribute.
Right.
And then the other 20% that's not getting it, you know, that's probably a reality. Like there's probably always going to be the weakest link type people in your band, but you need to make sure they're in the minority. And not definitely, obviously, totally the majority. And high-level bands fall into this trap as well. It's like you cut a lot of deals with quote-unquote good players that want to play in your quote-unquote good band. You cut a lot of deals, which is basically like you don't have to develop your personal playing. You just have to kind of show up and be awesome in our band. And like that's not it either. That's not actually what people want. That's not actually what the high-level player wants either.
It's an interesting thing that, like, I mean, you played basketball. Like the Olympic Dream Team isn't the best basketball team in the world. It's a collection of superstars, but the best basketball team in the world is not just a collection of superstars.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, basketball, like when they brought Coach K on to coach the team, why did they do that? You know, why did they do that? It's because they needed to figure out some way to bring all of these like superstars and get them to actually play as a team.
Cohesive unit, yeah.
Yeah, and like and they brought Coach K, who, by the way, that's his area of expertise. Like he takes potential superstars and teaches them how to work as a team. That's why he's the greatest coach of all time. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally.
Like that's not what the NBA coaches do, right? The NBA coaches like figure out how to get people who are already superstars to beat other teams of people who are already superstars.
Yeah.
Right? So like the Coach K move was genius.
Yeah.
And then he brought on a bunch of assistants that could help him in that process. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And then what is and by the way, it's totally what high-level pipe bands is as well. Mm-hmm. Totally. Because like, you know, in grade 1 pipe bands, you don't play in a grade 1 pipe band unless you're already superstar quality. And I guess what I mean, I'm talking about maybe a top 6 pipe band, right? And like the real job of a pipe major of those top-level bands is to manage all that talent, you know, and it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's also, for the record, almost 100% different than the environment that you're going to get in a lower grade band.
Yeah.
Like, for example, how much does Stewart have to teach guys in Inverary to play without crossing noises? Like how much?
Right. How often is that really going to come up? How much
is
in
that
discussed?
Circle?
Yeah.
But like, how much should that be discussed in a lower grade band?
Maybe that should be the main topic every night, actually.
Well, yeah, probably not. Actually, it should probably be rhythm. But yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Do you want to turn this somehow into a clever plug for finding bagpipe freedom?
Well, I love the idea of freedom. You know, definitely. I love the idea.
I'll insert
that's
an
what it
eagle
is.
soaring, the sound of an eagle screaming in the air as you say that in post.
Yeah. But I mean, that's what it is. The bagpipe represents an opportunity for you to like explore what freedom could mean and practice freedom. But like you have to, but you are responsible for digging yourself out of those things that constrain you, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like we have to learn the musical basics, and we have to learn how to operate the instrument. Like, you have to learn that.
Yeah.
Like, your coach cannot shoot foul shots for you.
Yeah.
You are going to have to play the chess opening, right? Like, you're going to have to do it, but it represents like something that is pretty rare. Like, it's pretty rare that you can do something that's truly your own in the world.
I love, Andrew, that like it feels like maybe almost comical to take such big ideas and cram them into our niche hobby, but also like, why not? Let's do it. You know, like that's what life is, right? This is what we're doing.
Think about, like, if it's anything like your life, think about, like, if there's anyone left out there listening, think about your life, right? And think about how rotten it would be if you didn't have creative outlets where you could do things. And then it's like, maybe you actually don't actually have any if you think about it enough.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are like that. It's like, I have several, I think, where I'm like creative-ish in the sense that like I have enough control over things to be able to paint a picture, but you instantly take it for granted as well. So it's not like, I'm not bragging, but like, yeah, if I want to pick up my pipes and play like an awesome tune, I can do that. Or if I want to write a computer program or a little, you know, or play like a game of chess, like I could do that. And like, I think that's really important. I think that's probably why people are drawn to the bagpipes in the first place. It's because it's like when you see someone play something really good on the pipes, like it is striking, isn't it? It's just amazing. And then you're like, ooh, I want to do that. And then, you know, it's going to be tricky to learn how to do that, but it's going to be worth it.